Welcome to the Bayesian Conspiracy. I'm Eneasz Brodsky.
I'm Stephen Zuber.
I'm Jay Sticky.
And I'm Charlie Bradley.
Welcome, Charlie Bradley. You are here to talk with us about a thing we will get into after we can do the less wrong posts, because we always do those first.
And now we're keeping you in suspense as to what the subject is.
Yes. It is not at all spicy, though.
I'm guessing because it doesn't summarize well, so I'm looking forward to it.
It does not summarize well.
Exactly.
Yeah. If we're going to get canceled, we're going to get canceled for our full argument.
In context.
Thing. Yes.
All right.
Cool. All right. So our first less wrong post this week is Pascal's mugging, tiny probabilities of vast utilities. And this is another one of those classics, which actually this one isn't just a classic. It created a whole new, I hate to use the word meme because it doesn't mean what Dawkins originally intended anymore as an idea that replicates. And now it means mean jokes. God damn, it even sounds weird.
I've actually heard people using it much more in, well, I don't know. Then again, I'm in a rationalist bubble, so.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, I think outside of that bubble, people have started, like, using the word meme correctly in some contexts.
Oh, cool. But this created the concept of Pascal's mugging, which is now spread through the wider society, and I have heard it used in like science programs and news programs by people who are definitely not in the rationalist community. I'm not sure if they're familiar with it, though. They might already be familiar, or they might have just picked it up through cultural osmosis. I found it really cool the first time. I think it was like 5 years ago when I heard it just used out in broader society, and I was like, whoa, it's gotten
Rationalist
some
stuff
penetration.
is starting to get out there. A friend of mine found some, like, interviews with Eliezer Yudkowsky on this channel that was just about conspiracy theories, but, like, we, like, looked up the YouTuber, and it doesn't look like he's in the community.
What was the conspiracy theory that they were talking about?
I was actually just trying to remember that, and I was like, oh no, it was Rocco's basilisk.
Oh,
I'm sorry to the whole rationalist community for reminding you that that happened.
I don't know why anyone is worried, like it's a thing that happened, whatever.
I saw on our Discord, someone snapped a picture of one of those microbreweries where, you know, they make their own beers and name them and stuff. And there's a different one every month. And so they write them up on the menu with chalk.
Please tell me there was a Rocco's basilisk.
Uh-huh. There was a Rocco's basilisk brew.
What kind of beer was it?
Oh, fuck, I don't know, man.
Oh.
Probably an IPA, because microbreweries tend to love IPAs for some reason.
I was trying to think of a pun, but I don't know enough about beer to make a joke about it.
Yeah.
The kind that you will regret not ordering. There you go. Yeah,
okay.
almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's no good.
Anyways.
Right. And maybe I deserve to be Pascal's mugged because we haven't explained.
Doesn't even make sense.
Exactly. We haven't talked about Pascal's mugging yet. What does it even mean, man?
Okay, so Pascal's mugging starts out by describing a large number, 3 to the third, using a certain type of up arrow notation. Basically, it's a very big number. It is very easy to describe because he did it with 5 characters, and the Turing machine can compute it pretty easily. But even writing it out in base 10 would require enormously more writing materials than there are atoms in the known universe, which is a paltry 10 to the 80th. And there's a whole bunch of math, you know, about like how big this number is to help you visualize it. But, you know, it's very mathy, and it's still very hard to visualize. Just anytime you say more than there are atoms in the universe, I get an idea that's a pretty big number. And
like, since I can't even get a good, like, I don't know, I have nothing in my brain to equate that number to, I just say big. Like I put a couple of varies before that, but I don't really care.
More varies though than there are.
Yeah, I don't really
atoms.
care how big it is, because it's just like, okay, very large, you got it.
Yeah.
I like how he's in the thing. It was like, consider Newth's UTH's up arrow notation, and I just sent you the picture of Captain America. No, I don't think I will. And I'm like, nah, skipping the math part. I know I already know where you're going with this.
Yeah.
There's a really cool visualization that I remember we did in kindergarten or first grade, where remember when printers always had, like, what the hell was it? The dots, the holes in the side.
Yeah.
So they could, like, I think it was so they could spool it, but anyway.
They would feed it through the printer using those.
Yeah. So we, for the entire year, tore the little holes off of all the printer paper and had the kids, like, break them into 10 and then bind 10 together and then bind 10 of those together. And we got
really
to
cool.
1 million holes.
Wow,
And
damn.
It was just, like, trash bags full of those, like, bounded up tiny holes.
Yeah.
There's a joke in there. That's a lot of holes.
It's impressive that you got to 1 million, though.
Well, it was called the Million Project, so that was our goal.
Okay. It is
I
surprising
think
how
there was, like, kids, like, bringing the holes from, like, printer paper at home if they had computers, which only half of the kids had computers at home because I'm old. I was one of the families that did not have a computer.
So,
But
what is Pascal's mugging? What is a Turing machine? I have no idea what you guys are talking about.
A Turing machine is basically the basic theoretical components of a computer.
we should really have Charlie on more often. Because how often do we just say a thing and not explain what it is?
Yeah, I don't know.
Every time.
Sorry.
I mean, at this point, we're at how many? Well over 100 episodes, right?
Yeah.
And I know we discussed a Turing machine at one point.
Did we? I don't remember having done so.
Well, we're discussing inferential distance on the next post, so that'll give us a great opportunity to explain why we're not explaining our terms. But
yeah, it's 130. This is our 137th episode. I know we talked about Turing machines at one point.
I'm sure we had to.
Yeah.
Maybe it was before I was on the podcast. 'cause I
So
don't
if
remember.
everybody goes back and listens to the previous 135 episodes of about 1.5 to 2 hours each, eventually you'll find a Turing machine description in there. But
Or Wikipedia and read the first paragraph. That said, I don't remember anything we've ever talked about in the show, so
who are you?
yeah. All right. So the Pascal's mugging, Pascal's wager is the formulation of the popular concept. Sorry, I'm running on
Popular a long time ago.
I'm running on bad sleep and what do you call it? Stimulants, caffeine and stuff. So this will be a fun conversation.
Do you want any alpha?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
At 1 in the afternoon? No way.
Oh, I don't know. Usually only lasts about 6 hours.
I don't know. In any case, most people are familiar with Pascal's wager, even if they haven't heard it formalized with that name. It's like the short version. Oh, you should believe in. It's in the context of religious arguments. You should believe in God because it doesn't cost you that much or nothing, and the payoff is huge.
Yeah.
So
And this was a philosopher or
Blaise Pascal,
was he a theologian? Or?
mathematician, actually.
He was a mathematician. Okay.
Yeah, one of those crazy God-believing mathematicians, which actually weren't that uncommon since
I think God belief was like the default at the time.
Well, not only was it the default, like mathematicians in particular tended to be more theistic than other scientists since they dealt much more in these very abstract kind of realms rather
Really?
than empirical stuff.
Huh.
we're getting distracted again.
We are, sorry.
No, you're good.
Okay.
So that's Pascal's wager. Pascal's mugging.
Right, like
is-
if you believe you've so what was it? If you don't believe, you gain a little bit in life, and when
You get to be more hedonistic, and you get your Sunday mornings to yourself.
Yeah, you gain just a little bit in life. If you die and there's no God, well, you didn't win anything. But if there die and there is a God, you go to hell and you've lost everything forever. On the other hand, if you're a Christian and you lose your Sundays, you pay a little bit of cost. If you die, there's no God. Oh well, you're dead. You lost those days on Sundays. But if there is a God, you go to heaven and everything's wonderful forever. So, due to the fact that it's just a small cost in life for ginormous payouts in the afterlife, you should totally believe in God.
It's basically cryonics.
Well, yes and no.
with better probability distribution.
Right.
Yeah.
It's cryonics with non-zero probability.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean that's the
cryonics, I guess, would be the other way with non-zero. Yeah.
right. So that's the pitch I give for cryonics. Except you assign basic non-zero probabilities to these things involved.
Yeah.
It's a really good argument
Yeah.
when you can put numbers into it.
Yeah. When you're not bullshitting and saying it's nothing or it's infinite or whatever, then it's you can actually
So like
do a calculation to determine whether or not it's worth it for you.
Yeah. It's how many dollars per month and what are the chances?
Right.
Yeah.
the obvious answer though was always in my understanding, but like okay, but what about the probability that your religion is wrong and that one of these other ones is correct?
Yeah.
Then you're still better buying a lotto ticket than not buying one at all is the standard rebuttal. But
But that's
Then-
wrong.
But
You're
some
better
of
not
them are
buying
mutually
lotto
like
tickets.
incompatible. Like if you can't, I don't think, be both a Buddhist and an Muslim.
so that's why you pick the most vindictive God, because he's the one who's the least likely to forgive you for choosing the wrong one. Like Buddha would probably be fine with it, if you're just a good person. No, I'm serious. This is how the argument ends. But then
Buddha is not a god.
the unfortunate end of the unfortunate conclusion of that is that when you pick the most vindictive God to worship for your life, that doesn't come at the very small cost as advertised at the beginning of the pamphlet.
Right.
It comes at a huge cost.
Yeah. You got to start going around killing all the
Compare all the world
disbelievers.
religions.
Yeah, you've got to go to the most extreme because that's the God who would be most likely to punish you.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Pascal's mugging is
When you get mugged by a mathematician
basically
named Pascal.
It's someone saying, "Give me $5, or I'll use my magic powers from outside the Matrix to run a Turing machine that simulates and kills 3 3 people."
can we just say a lot?
A lot. Well,
Yeah.
I also want to throw in that he added in one more up notation than there was before. So that number before, where there were already you couldn't put enough zeros on a piece of paper if you had all the materials in the universe to write it out. This number is like
It's
exponentially
infinitely
bigger than that, like hugely bigger than that. So it's an extremely large number of people that are going to be tortured and murdered to the point where, like, I don't know, you would need more neurons than there are atoms in the universe to even comprehend this number or some shit.
I'm sure. Yeah, some giant number.
Yeah.
And so basically it's the inverse of a Pascal's wager, and the question is like, well,
just Pascal's wager to tell you can up to 11, really.
Yeah, I
Here's
suppose.
almost no cost, $5, and here's the most extreme
Yeah,
possible. Yeah,
fair enough. I to me, what's interesting is, I mean, and maybe I'm just a bad rationalist, or I don't, find this argument compelling, but I've never really been.
Oh, no human finds it compelling.
I suppose, but like, well, the post is him wondering, like, am I failing as a good thinker to not be concerned about this sort of thing?
Well, he
because
does say that
because
at
a
the
robot
end.
wouldn't or would find it compelling, or likely would if if it was just based off of.
I mean, this
Like-
also makes me think of just what's the thing where like scope insensitivity. I wondered that same thing about like, am I a bad person for caring more about my family members and friends than people dying in some, other country that I don't know, that I've never met,
All right.
never seen.
This is like scope insensitivity, like with really bad eyesight and much bigger numbers, right? Because it's like you can't, I mean, would you give $100 to your sibling who really need $100, or would you give it to save everybody on the continent of
Yeah.
Asia, right?
Nobody would call you a bad person if you gave it to your sibling, because we humans understand that, like, okay, there's certain ways that, like, the way that we think makes us human.
Wait a minute.
Let me
Nobody would call you a bad person for giving a piece of gum to your brother instead of
A piece of gum.
saving all the people in Asia?
I think I said $100, but
Oh, $100.
in any
Okay,
case,
whatever.
I felt
I
like
meant it
that,
as
that
an
it was the
explicit.
$100 either goes to your sibling who needs it, or you give it to charity.
Right. So I actually meant it in the sense of everyone in Asia will die if you don't give them the $100
Oh,
instead.
okay.
But yeah, so you're right. But most of us understand on the just how big your care network is, that how humans are wired. We're closer to the people next to
Like,
us.
we can forgive ourselves for being mere humans
Right.
in most of those cases.
I
But-
in this
but
I
in-
still
case,
have
but
a hard time with that.
in the
I kinda
context
hate it.
in the context of like if everyone was going to die and if 2 billion people were going to die, then you'd be a monster for not doing it.
Like, people keep saying whenever the Charlie experiment comes up that, they'd save the one person that is close to them rather than letting the 5 people die. And I don't know what I would do in that case. At least for me, it's not the obvious given that I would save the one person I love.
I'll try not to fall on any train tracks near you.
Please don't. I mean, I don't know.
Friends
Like,
don't
I
let
might,
friends
but I
play
just
with
can't
trolleys.
say it with like certainty. And I keep having issues with the fact that so many people just easily will say I saved the one.
I donate money to charity to people that I have no idea who they are, where precisely they live, and I don't give monthly money to people I know.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, I don't think it's like impossible to imagine that people do it the other way around.
Yeah.
It's just like more
But
common.
like, what if your sibling was in the hospital and needed money to pay the bill, and you were like, "Sorry, I have this $100, but I've like dedicated, myself to sending it to charity each month."
Sure.
Yeah, I'm giving it to my sibling.
Yeah, that's where I think people would call you a bad person. Like,
Really?
or
That they would that
well, the thing is, if you have the money, and then like, I don't know, socially, I think that would be really awkward, right?
if I only
Like,
have the
what would your
$100.
parents? What would your parents think? Well, the thing is that like you have an extra $100, and you refuse to give it to the sibling because you say, no, I always give $100 to charity. So like you can find your own money.
I mean, it depends on the sibling, honestly. There's one particular sibling where I'm like, no, you should have the $100, you wanker. But for some of my other siblings, I'd be like, yeah, the charity's just gonna miss out on this $100 this month because you're in the hospital.
Well, and like people spend large sums of money up to and including their entire life savings, prolonging their life for like 2 more years at the end of life, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
When you're 90, trying to hit 92 or something.
Mm.
That in any case, we're getting kind of far
We're
afield.
getting way afield. So the
I
thing
feel like it's still related, actually, but
I think the thing that's important here is the sentence, suppose I build an AI. And he goes on with like, suppose I build AI that work on some bounded analog. But the thing is, Eliezer, at the time of writing this, and to this day, as far as I know, is attempting to build a machine intelligence, which could theoretically, based on what you know, maybe take over the world. Or if nothing
he was
else, have
trying to come up with
extreme
the-
impacts.
friendly AI theory.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I don't know if he's trying to build the mind, but he's trying to
Well, yes.
solve the problems that building a mind will create.
Yeah, the whole blog is in the purpose of creating an AI that will not destroy humanity if it were to be built, and that the Pascal's mugging is a real problem, because if you're a machine mind that works on probabilities and theorems like this that work on numbers, and someone gives you that sort of a mugging threat, like no matter how low you put the possibility that they are telling you the truth, that they're actually, a Dark Lord of the Matrix that's going to do this, it still basically adds up to that huge number.
Since 0 isn't a probability,
Right.
then the chance that this could happen is worth $5.
No matter how arbitrarily small the chance is, as long as it's not 0, the huge amount of suffering that you're going to save is worth it.
If you're a mindless robot following just pure math.
Well, no,
That's
you're a very smart robot with a personality, but that thinks on math.
Well, that's kind of us minus the thinking on math part.
Right.
But I mean, I'm inclined just to say, nah, you're a charlatan, get out of here. But to me, it's fun. This is almost like, this is the kind of like philosophical, mental masturbation that I enjoy, but I don't think really does anything.
Well, I think it's important if you're making a machine mind.
Right. But since I'm not losing any sleep over it. Like if someone, the problem is like the probability is so small of this person being a Dark Lord of the Matrix, right?
Yeah.
But like if I would said, hey man, if you give me $1,000, I will put $100. I will distribute it across a bunch of cryptos that I think might blow up, and in 5 years you might be a millionaire.
Mm-hmm.
And in exchange, I'll keep $50 of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like to you that might not be worth the risk of losing all that money, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the odds are all small, but those are actually like boundedly small, like possible to think of numbers, right? You can say I assign a 1 in 10,000 chance to any of these working or something.
Yeah.
Not a 1 in 10 to the negative 23rd probability, right?
Yeah. Well, it also brings up, part of the problem is, what if the thing that the AI is asked to give up for these theoretical people isn't $5? It's the fate of the Earth itself.
Right.
Because just the Earth is really infinitesimal compared to all these however many uncountable number of people. So, what's the sacrifice of one Earth for a chance to save that many people?
Yeah. It says a mind that works strictly by Solomonoff induction would not know how to rationalize reasons that Pascal's mugging mattered less than Earth's existence. How should an Occam-abiding mind avoid being dominated by tiny probabilities of vast utilities?
Yeah.
So there is a point.
Yes. And one of the interesting things about the post is that he doesn't have an answer. He's just like, so how do we fix this problem? Guys, anyone? Because this is a problem. And then he says, like, do I have an instinct to resist exploitation by arguments anyone could make? Am I unsatisfied by any visualizations in which the dominant mainline probability leads to a loss? Do I drop sufficiently small probabilities from consideration entirely? Like, he's trying to figure out why do I ignore this probability, and how can I generalize that to an AI so it also makes what I consider the correct decision without fucking over all the programming and ruining everything we've been trying to do to make this AI work in the first place.
Yeah, that is a fun question. It does end on a good point like that.
Yeah.
And I skimmed the comments. It's funny because there were some negatively voted ones, which you don't see that often.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't pull any out, so.
Yeah.
But if you're curious, go read the comments.
Yeah. And he does ask at the very end, like you said, Stephen, is it me that's wrong? Should I not be ignoring this tiny possibility?
I mean, it's hard to know how you could possibly operate your life that way.
Right.
Right? I mean, you couldn't.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing I was trying to bring up about scope and sensitivity, or trolley problems.
I think, if you
I think you can live your life that way, but, I think it's the reason that effective altruism is unpopular with, people that aren't in the rationalist community, because it feels cold and robotic.
But it's like, all I have to do to get you to be Pascal's mugged is tell you that, your car doesn't really run on gas. It runs on destroying souls of angels or something. and they are a billion times as sentient as you are, and it's actually a really bad thing. That's the level of absurdity that's involved here, right? It's not merely if you're throwing money at charity to save lives, you're actually saving lives of actual people that you could, in theory, meet.
Yeah.
I'm not making shit up to extort you to never drive your car or something, right? When I get in my car, I don't do a 60-point inspection on it every time I start it, and I don't even open the hood to see if there's an animal sleeping in the engine, right? Or on top of the engine where it's warm. I should, because I care about animals. I've seen pictures of raccoons and cats and stuff under there.
But you can live your whole life,
I will almost certainly live my whole life without an animal ever being under there, right? But there's a non-negligible chance, and that's not even approaching the infinitesimal probability of a Pascal's mugging.
Well, generally the animal would get off the engine block before it got hot
No.
enough to hurt it, right?
Or like it
No,
could
animals
get
die
caught in
this
a
way all
belt
the
or something
time.
and
Yeah.
ripped apart. Yeah.
Yeah.
It
It's
could
so
go
sad.
could go south, but it almost so closely never happens that I don't lose any sleep over it. To the point where I don't spend 3 seconds or maybe 30 seconds checking my car before I leave
Yeah.
every day.
Like you can't live your life trying to protect yourself from every possibility of something killing you.
And that's every like real possibility like that actually happens. But so the mugging thing is so ridiculously unlikely that how could you possibly operate that way, right? You'd be forced to give everyone who asked you $10 or however much, right, to give them both your kidneys and sell your family and harvest their organs. Like if you really believed any of this, you'd just be this absurd. There's a movie I'm sure where was it Yes Man or something where like they have to agree to say yes to everything for a day.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's what it was.
was that Jim Carrey?
Yeah.
It sounds like Jim Carrey because he also got cursed with not being able to lie for a day and Liar Liar.
That one was a really good one.
yeah.
Was Yes
I
Man
love
good?
Jim Carrey.
It was.
Okay. I should see that.
But in any case, no one took advantage of him enough that day to totally ruin his life because it's like, hey,
I think because they didn't know he had the curse.
Yeah.
oh yeah, I haven't seen the movie. If someone found out, be like, hey, can I have all your money and while I'm at it, all your family's money and all their organs? Like, what is he just supposed to say yes? So that would be you if you operated this way.
Yeah.
So I just say, nah, fuck it, not worried about it. Somehow I'll just I'll meh that problem away. That's my level of coherent dismissal of it. I think
we need to program AIs with a meh function.
I mean, and that meh function could say anything that's I don't know under 1 in 10 billion times 1 in 10 billion odds or something, right? You could throw a hard number at it.
I don't think you should necessarily throw a hard number. Maybe something that is theoretically impossible to verify.
Or like
if
yeah.
you can't. If this guy is not giving you any evidence that he's a Dark Lord of the Matrix, just
I don't
assume he's lying.
I don't think we'll solve the problem of how to train an AI safely to handle this problem.
No, not
the
here in
next
this
I
podcast.
agree.
minutes.
I think what they're doing at Miri is trying to deconstruct sort of how we got our own values in the first place.
Yeah, and it's possible
Because we
that
do
our
also think on math, just way like further down.
Much fuzzier.
yeah, and I think that not just values but also like the intuitions we have. Again, we're not
Like sort of
susceptible to Pascal's muggings.
the obvious thing that we have is that we're like a communal species, a social species. So we put like higher weight on the things that we value, which are like tends to be other people. We'd have to make an AI that's capable of like altruism or empathy or whatever the thing that humans have that make us care about that.
I recently heard a cool argument that really we can think of our minds as extending to all the people around us as well, because we store a lot of our knowledge in other people's brains.
Mhm.
If we don't necessarily know something, we're like,
Yeah,
hey,
we're
you
kind of one
remind me of that
organism.
thing, or I don't necessarily need to know how to do my plumbing because I know someone else who does know how to do plumbing, and yeah.
We would never have gone beyond the hunter-gatherer stage if we weren't able to sort of collectively store memory and pass it down through generations.
It's good shit. Speaking of storing memory and passing it down, should we go on to the next?
Totally.
Okay. The next post is Illusion of Transparency, Why No One Understands You. Anyone want to jump on this, or should I start it?
We always know what we mean by our words, so we expect others to know it too.
And that is basically the entirety of of the post in a nutshell.
Yeah, it's funny because it's that sounds like obvious and almost to the point of like tautological, right? Like I assume that y'all know what I meant when I used that last sentence, right?
Yes.
Because I knew what I meant when I said it, and even if I stumbled through it or mispronounced a word, I still know what I meant, and I assume that you do too. This turns out to be an actual problem when communicating anything. And he describes a fun experiment that's actually worth maybe touching on. But
Several fun experiments, yeah.
yeah, I found that one of the answering machine message like the most fun there.
Oh, you did?
Because it had the funniest wrinkles in it to me.
Okay, to
But-
me that was the most suspect, but go ahead and describe it real quick, or should I? Or
Yeah, so June gives Mark a recommendation for a restaurant. Mark goes there and has one of two experiences: is either terrible and the service was sucky, or it was great and the service was great. He calls her and leaves a voicemail message saying, "I'm trying to
it
remember
was
the exact
marvelous,
words." Yeah.
just marvelous.
Exactly. And depending on how they talk, I'm assuming you have to take this within the bounds of like the normal way of speaking, right? If I never use the word marvelous to describe something if I was describing a food place to you, so you'd think I'm being funny probably.
Right.
But if we usually talk that way, so I'm assuming that
If
like
you said marvelous, I would think you were being sarcastic because it's not something you would say.
exactly. So let's just assume that
Let's pretend Steven's a theater nerd.
That's
super dramatic.
That's within the that's within the range of how they usually communicate. So if he had a good time, or rather, if you ask people, okay, Mark had a bad time, he left this voicemail, how will June interpret it? Some high percent, the majority of people will say, did I say good time the first time I said this?
No, he had a bad time.
So if he had a bad time and he left this voicemail and you ask people, will June get that he was being sarcastic? Most people think yes. And if you say he had a good time and he left this voicemail, what will June get? She'll like, oh, he'll think he's sincere. But it's the same voicemail.
Yeah, they played the same one.
And June doesn't know how Mark actually had the experience, right? And what's funny too is that if
when they say he had a bad experience, but he's lying to June and wants her to think it was a good experience, they assume that June thinks that he had a good experience.
And there's no reason to think I think I've referenced this at least twice before on the podcast, but if you YouTube Key and Peele text message,
oh, that's a good one.
It's brilliant.
It's this exact problem,
Noticed,
and
but
I mean it's a obviously written to comedic effect, but like there's no reason to think that she would get the two layers that you're doing through the deception of trying to be funny and whatever, be sarcastic or be joking, right? Yeah. So the idea that not only does Mark assume that Jane will get the right message or not if he's trying to subvert the expectation, but that other people also assume that, that's the funny and insane part. Yeah.
So we're much worse at this when we're little. I find this really hilarious. Like, there's a test that you can do to see if a child has learned theory of mind yet or not, and it's the one where you show the kid a video of this kid has a ball, the kid puts the ball in a box, another kid comes and takes the ball out of the box, and then the first kid comes back, and you ask the child, like, where does this kid think the ball is? And because they saw the other kid take it out of the box, they're like, oh, he'll come back and he'll know that, like, Jeffrey over there has it, if they don't have theory of mind. But, like, if they do, they'll be like, I realize that the fact that I know that Jeffrey took the ball doesn't mean that Jimmy knows that Jeffrey took the ball.
So he'll think it's still in the box.
And this is a very hard thing for children to do. But we're still not good at it as adults. Like, I sort of think it's interesting that there's one test that you can do that shows that, but
see, I didn't.
But I've definitely met adults that are much better and worse at this. And I don't know what really like causes you to be better or worse at it.
I didn't think that the answering machine test was like a great one because I kind of figured maybe the people thought that just Mark and June know each other and have their own thing. Like, we don't use marvelous, but maybe the people assumed that he would, or they just assumed that Mark's a good liar when, he was trying to lie to her about how it was a good time.
That was my thought too, was like, of course people thought if he was trying to fool her, he would be more successful because they have a relationship. So he knows how to phrase something so that she would be misinformed.
That's valid. I think to me what was fun was that people, without knowing how Mark actually, if he enjoyed the restaurant or not, they would assume that Jane understood the exact same message the right way, right?
If they know each other, he should be able to somewhat be able to convey that, which is I think what people are going with.
Okay, yeah.
That's why I didn't like that example as much.
No, that's totally fair.
Well,
but they had two other examples which were much more interesting.
Which one did you like?
So I like the goose hangs high one.
I like that one too.
Yeah, it's an old expression which no one uses anymore.
Oh, is that a real expression?
I don't know. Apparently they were told that it's a real expression in the past.
Okay.
And I don't know if it actually was or not.
The goose hangs high is an excellent expression, and we should bring it back.
Yes.
Except first we have to find out which thing it means.
Well, the subjects were told either it means the future looks great or the future looks gloomy. And regardless of what they were told, when they were asked, what do you think someone who just heard the goose hangs high in a conversation would think it means, they generally always thought they would mean whatever they were told. So if they were told the future looks gloomy and they were asked, hey, what do you think someone who just heard this expression would think it means? They're like, oh yeah, they probably think that means it's gloomy because
obviously.
Yeah, duh.
Everyone knows that.
And yeah, the other way around, which was a much more interesting experiment in my opinion.
Apparently, it does actually mean it's an old-fashioned things are or will be very pleasant, desirable, or merry. Everything is looking up.
Okay, so everybody on the podcast, let's bring it back. The goose hangs high.
All right.
How's your goose?
It's hanging high, man. Sounds vaguely sexual.
See
Yeah.
It really does.
But see, for all you guys know, I inverted the definition I just found.
You son of a bitch. It's okay.
You don't actually know if I did that or not, right?
I don't know.
So, but that was the thing, is that, you know, if that's the point of the experiment here, is that if you told people it meant one thing, they would just believe it and think it's obvious to everyone else.
Well, I wouldn't think it's obvious, but
Well,
I mean, I
not-
believed
Like, a
you
part
because
of
I
you would
think you're
think
not a
that.
dirty liar.
They thought listeners would perceive the meaning presented as standard.
If
Okay.
you know something, then you just tend to think that it's obvious to others.
That's
Like,
the illusion of transparency.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, it's just being bad at like the
I thought
theory of mind thing.
the really interesting examples at the end where it says 2 days before Germany's attack on Poland in World War II, Chamberlain sent a letter intended to make it clear that Britain would fight if any invasion occurred. The letter, phrased in polite diplomatese, was heard by Hitler as conciliatory, and the tanks rolled in.
That's why you don't fuck around when you're writing letters about war.
Yeah.
And you include the words, "I'm not fucking around. This aggression will not stand, man."
Nice. Yeah, so that was basically it. Don't be too quick to blame those who misunderstood your perfectly clear sentences, because they're never all that clear.
There was another experiment that wasn't in this post where people would tap a song that's in their head, you know, whether it's
Oh,
Happy
yeah.
Birthday or some other popular song.
I've tested this on people. Tapping Happy
Me-
Birthday, nobody can hear it.
But
And
when
it sounds insane from your own perspective. Try it.
I know, right? It's great because, and people would assume with astonishingly high accuracy. I can't remember what it was. It was, I want to say 70+%, maybe 80 or 90. But the majority of people assumed that, oh, I'm doing a popular song. The person who's listening to me tap will totally know what song I'm doing. I'm really confident, and they never did, or almost never did.
Yeah.
And that's just the illusion of transparency. Well, it's clear to me what I'm doing. How is it not clear to you?
Yeah.
Huh. Well, that is sort of a way that you can test this, I guess.
Yeah, it's a nice at-home test it yourself, and
Not just test it yourself, but make it really salient with personal
Yeah.
experience.
I was just thinking about, like, I've run into cases where I've tried to explain to people that, like, I can't read your mind. And they're like, well, how could you not know? And this would be a good example to bring up, like, okay, what song is this?
Mhm.
That's Happy Birthday.
because we primed Happy Birthday, I actually
Yeah.
knew that one. But yeah.
I was at Walmart and I was getting boxes for my upcoming move. And I noticed that a lot of the boxes they had out said, for reuse, each box costs the company $1. And then there were boxes that did not say that. So I walk up to an employee and there's a big cart of unmarked boxes. And then there's a different cart with the marked boxes. And I said, is it all right with you if I take the unmarked boxes with me? And they look at me and they're like, no, you can't have the marked boxes. And there's like this 2-minute excited explanation of why I can't have those. And I let her finish. And then I pointed at the unmarked and I said, unmarked boxes, the ones that do not say that I cannot have them. And she goes, oh yeah, fine.
She's probably had to tell people that so many times that it's just like a script that she's primed for.
But that was an example where I was using very clear language. We both spoke the same language. The boxes were there for reference, but I still failed to come across. I needed to point at the boxes as well.
I'm curious, how different were the unmarked boxes from the marked ones in terms of like physical dimensions and all that?
Very different.
Okay. So they probably were just going to throw out the unmarked ones?
Absolutely.
Okay. Because I was thinking, did they just forget to mark those? And you
Nope.
got a whole bunch of $1 boxes
They're all
off them?
incredibly clear
Okay.
and very different. But I thought this was perfect for this discussion where I was just like, could I have phrased that better? Probably not. Perhaps I should have
Could I have been more
pointed
clear?
the first time I said it to add even more information to what I was conveying.
It's a thing that comes up fairly often when you're trying to write fiction too.
It's really good sometimes to over-explain. Or to default to over-explaining.
Yeah, so the moral here is be not too quick to blame those for misunderstanding your perfectly clear sentences, spoken or written. Chances are your words are more ambiguous than you think. Now, that's just chances. Sometimes you're perfectly clear and they just don't understand you, like with the box thing. But the moral is that if someone, and this actually, you know, I don't know if I started doing this before or after I read this post, because I read this first 10 something years ago, but you know, I, especially with people close to me, if like we're having a conversation, I'm like, all right, if I say something that is offensive or rude, can you ask me to clarify that? Because I almost certainly didn't mean it that way.
Yeah.
And you know, good friends, good dialogue partners will understand that, and it seldom has come to occasion where they need to point that out. But when it does, we get to skip the whole part where they think I'm being an asshole, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
This, like, you said it was like 10 years ago you read this, probably the same for me. I actually distinctly remember this sequence post making me a better person.
Oh.
Because it makes you so much more willing to give people the benefit of the doubt.
Oh, that's awesome.
And also, like, doing things like, actually just, like, asking someone to rephrase something is something I've, to this day, like, done a lot. When I jump to some conclusion, I'm about to start, like, fighting them about it, or also just, I've stopped doing the thing of, like, I don't know if everyone does this, but like when someone would say something I didn't understand, I used to kind of nod because it would be impolite to sort of interrupt them and be like, wait, like,
And
I don't know what Solomonov induction is or whatever, but like...
And now do you ask for clarification more often?
All the time, and like it's made conversation so much better.
Excellent. All right, well, for next time, we are going to be discussing the posts, self-anchoring, and I gotta ask you guys about this. Expecting short inferential differences is the one after self-anchoring. Didn't we already?
Distances.
Did I not say distances?
Differences, I think.
Oh, sorry, distances. Didn't we already do an entire episode about this? I tried to search our archives, but I didn't find anything.
I don't remember.
We've definitely talked about it, but we can summarize it quickly.
It sounds like probably one of the ones you would have done before I was on.
Okay.
Since your early episodes were more sort of like explaining rationalists.
There's also the wrinkle in your brain that you've recorded a handful of these over the last 5 years in audio form.
Oh, maybe this was one of the ones that I was asked
You definitely spoke this one.
I did.
I remembered in your voice.
Okay. Well, expecting short. Yeah. Okay, yeah. This was one I read just out loud for the HP Memoir podcast back when we were in the middle of waiting for updates. So yeah, we have not discussed this on the show. So we will also be doing expecting short inferential distances as the other one, which is again a classic. We're hitting a lot of classics here.
And if you'd like a refresher before next episode, you can hear it in Enyash's voice.
Yes, you can.
Where is it, Enyash?
It's at the HP Memoir podcast, and I will add a link to the show notes at thebayesianconspiracy.com.
Quite.
Alrighty. We are back, and we are going to dive into our topic, which is kind of a touchy topic. If people want to know why the fuck did we even come up with this, Stephen and me have a podcast called Not Everything is a Clue, where we read and analyze Worth the Candle by Alexander Wales. And about a month ago, we were talking about, I don't know, the protagonist and other people there having possible sex or whatever. And like Stephen was all weirded out by it because they're 17. And I was like, whatever, man, they're 17. That's totally old enough to be having sex. And Stephen was like, ew, age of consent though, they're children. And I don't know.
I feel like I was a tad more articulate than that, but that is not that is not an unfair summary of my position.
Okay.
All right.
And I was like, to me it wasn't that big a deal, partly because, I think teenagers can be mature enough to do that, but also because my first sex partner was when I was a teenager and she was 5 years my elder. And then my second sex partner was 10 years my elder, but at that point I was in my early 20s. And like I've had several significant others with relationships that they had when they were in their teens that were with men in their late 20s. And so, like, I don't know.
And so in case it's not clear, the main subject is age of consent.
Yes. And so, yeah, me and Charlie got to talking after I was talking with Stephen about this whole, like, age of consent is 17 weird thing. And Charlie was like, well, I have stuff to say about that. And so now we are here to say stuff about it. That is the short thing, the short version of how we got there.
So should we say things about it?
Sure, let's say things about it. Who wants to?
I'm waiting for somebody else because I don't actually have a fully formed opinion about this. Somebody influence me.
We can start with the age of consent as it's defined in Colorado.
I was interested in why you earlier said it depends.
Yes.
It probably depends on how old you are, right?
So I looked at a few websites when I was looking up the statutes, and I like...
Now you're on a list. Sorry. How old does the person have to be before I can fuck them legally?
That is an awkward thing to Google.
So I liked this website by a criminal defense attorney, a local one, H. Michael Stanberg.
This episode brought to you by...
Right. So what he wrote is Colorado does not define the term age of sexual consent. Colorado law is written to make a determination of whether individuals based on age have the legal capacity to consent to having sex. The age of consent is then determined by what is excluded from the Colorado criminal law. And my head exploded a
I was
little bit.
about to say, wow, I really like this. They're going to evaluate whether they're emotionally mature enough. Then wait, what?
Yeah. So, Colorado age of consent explained further. The example 1. The alleged victim is under 15. The accused is at least 4 years older than 15 and is not the spouse of the victim.
Okay. Wait, is not the spouse. Wait.
The older party need not be an adult to be guilty of this crime. In fact, juveniles are often charged with this crime in Colorado juvenile court. Consent is not a defense in these cases.
Oh my god, is this like the case where like 2 preschoolers are playing doctor and the one child is accused of raping
I'm just
the other?
reading summary of the law. Example 2. The alleged victim is between 15 and 17. The alleged perpetrator is at least 10 years older and not the spouse of the victim.
In case that's not clear, spousal rape is fine. You can get married here.
If one of the parties is 15, 16, or 17, and the other is 25, 26, 27, or older, this is also considered statutory rape. But in this situation, by definition, the older party must be an adult to be guilty of this crime, and not the spouse of the victim.
Also, how are they defining adult if not by age?
I was curious about that too from the first example. You said they need not be an adult, but they have to be 4 years older than 15. And so I thought adulthood was 18.
I
Like
thought
you got
we were
struck by
trying to
lightning.
define adulthood here.
Yeah.
And he helpfully goes on, 2 Colorado laws criminalize sex between adults and minors, and between minors, regardless of consent. I have a problem with this myself.
Oh my god.
Wait, sorry, can you repeat that? That didn't sink in.
2 Colorado laws criminalize sex between adults and minors, and between minors, regardless of consent.
You know why that is? That's because parents wanted the ability to accuse their child who had consensual sex with their partner to accuse the other child of rape.
So
Like
there's a misdemeanor and a felony. The misdemeanor is a person commits the crime of sexual assault if he or she is 10 years older than a minor who is 15 or 16 years old. I'm just summarizing. The felony. The person commits class 4 felony sexual assault if he or she is at least 4 years older than a minor who is 14 years old or younger.
So
So if you're 18 and you sleep with a 14-year-old and it's consensual, then you are a rapist.
Felony rapist, yeah.
So
Felony rapist.
I think I don't want to like just throw out the last 90 seconds, but I don't know if it's worth getting bogged down in the confusing legalese of Colorado's particular definitions of
I just thought it might be a good conversation
Oh, no,
starter about consent.
It totally is, and it's interesting, and it proves that it's murky and weird legally. But I almost don't care what the law is,
Okay.
like just because I don't want what's right and wrong to be constrained by what can be explained to the average judge. Especially like if that judge happens to be in one county versus like across the street in the other county, that doesn't seem that doesn't seem like that should depend on what is right and wrong.
I'm really wondering what other states' consent laws look like and how much do they all differ from each other just across like the United States?
I know Michigan's...
Not even bringing in other countries' consent laws if they even have them.
I don't know all the details behind it, but I know Michigan's you can consent at age 16, which is... I looked it up because my previous partner said that she could have gotten the guy she slept with on statutory rape. And I was like, huh. And she grew up in Michigan. I wonder how old she was then. And so she must have been 15 or younger at the time. And, I mean, she didn't. She said it was a great relationship and she was happy with it. But she had a...
But if her parents had disapproved of the relationship, they could
well,
have...
if they had found out about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they could have got him. I think she also kind of had like, a fun kind of kick out of the fact that she could have gotten him on statutory rape. It was sort of like a power play kind of thing.
That's weird.
Yeah, it's coercion through legal ramifications is tight.
Well, I mean, it's not like she did any of that. Just
No, but
thought that.
But because of the implication.
Right. But I mean, that's more of a kink thing.
I know. I was trying to use the word implication with my best Dennis stare from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Whenever you say those words, I always think of that episode. Now.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, when he told me that story, my initial reaction was ew. And then I also had to be like, oh, well, I tend to find power imbalances scenarios sexy, but that's in fantasy land. When
Yeah.
I've actually had power imbalance scenarios in real life, it's never
Real
been
power
sexy.
imbalances in relationships are pretty bad, in my experience.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't think I've ever been in one with major power imbalances, but I'm definitely on the power imbalances are sexy as hell boat. I think pretty much all
in
erotica
Fantasyland,
has,
though?
yeah.
Yeah,
has
no, I
fans.
totally agree. In Fantasyland, they're very sexy, and in real life, not so much, though.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, you know what? Just I had a partner that was 5 or 6 years younger than me at one point, and they were still in college. Like, I was graduated and had a job, and I owned a house, and they lived at it. And so it was neither of our fault, but there was definitely a power imbalance there, and I was always aware of it in the back of my mind, and it made me feel creepy, or like made me feel like I had to. I don't know. Like,
I think it's impossible to have a relationship where there's no power imbalance.
I think that's true, but I think that the more there is a power imbalance, though, the more potentially dangerous or like bad the situation could be. Another of my examples is that I had a sexual relationship with one of my college professors for several years.
Wow.
Whilst they were professing you?
No, like we were friends before that, but like I was still in college at the the school that he taught at. I just was not in his class.
Okay, I was going to say,
So,
I mean,
yeah.
the issue there would be if you're in his class.
And that he was like 10 or 11 years older than me, and I was a depressed sack of shit because that was right after my friends both died. And so this was clearly, like, in retrospect, I didn't like this guy. I was being taken advantage of the whole time. He like parasitized my need for support and friendship, and then just like got into my pants. And I said no actually he got me drunk for the first time that I had ever been drunk.
Oh, damn.
And then had sex with me after taking me to his mom's house way up in the mountains.
That's
So I had no way out of
really
that, and I
fucked
said
up.
no, and he kept saying, "No, you really want it. No, you do."
So that's
And-
fucking awful.
Yeah, that is.
I will.
So that's a bunch of power
That's date
imbalances
rape.
there.
Yeah.
Which is rape.
And you know what? I told my parents that I was dating a college professor, and my mom said, "Good for you. They make good money, right?" Which no, he didn't. Lol.
No one.
But like, she didn't even raise a brow at that though, because that was like my mom, was like raised like poor and lower class, and this didn't seem unusual to her at all. In fact, like her response was, "Oh, good, he makes good money, right?" Like,
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons to seek out a partner that has more power. Like, if someone has a lot
I
of
wouldn't
money,
want to.
if someone has a lot of money and can take care of you, that I would find that attractive. If like I am in a shitty ass emotional position and they can be stable and help me through things, that is great. Like,
But they could also take advantage of you, and you can't protect yourself.
they could, yeah. Well, I mean, that's not a necessarily a problem with a power imbalance. That it's a problem with a shitty person. Like, even someone who is poor and trashy and sucks can take advantage of someone and use them in that terrible way.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I saw a comedian on Friday night named Matthew Broussard, and his girlfriend works in marketing or finance or something and makes 4 times what he makes, or at least what he did in 2020, because, comedy was hard last year. And so he's perfectly aware that, like, and they share an apartment in New York. And so he's like, obviously, she wins all the, like, we don't fight. Because there's what am I going to do? Like, go threaten to sleep in the hall? Like, so he's making fun of this power imbalance. But the other thing, the reason I chuckled to myself was he had a joke about, like, she asked if I'd ever leave her, and he had said, well, it'd have to be a very competitive offer.
Nice.
Yeah.
But I realize we're talking serious stuff, but injecting levity into serious stuff is my go-to.
No, that was like breaking the tension.
So
It's also kind of a
skills.
problem. Like, does that mean the more successful you get, the less you can date people? And do you have to break up with someone who still isn't successful?
do you have to turn down raises? Like,
Yeah.
so I mean, that I do agree that, like, it's more about the person than, like, the power imbalance, right?
Right.
It's not your fault that you're big enough to beat me up, but
It's the same
if
thing
it
with,
was just
like,
if it came to
quote-unquote
blows,
privilege, like, it's not your fault that you're like white cis male,
Yeah.
but it is something to take into account.
I did not realize that until I was well into my first relationship, that one of the things she really liked about me was that I was white.
God.
Being the ethnic majority of whatever country you're in is, a form of power and a thing people seek out. So I was like, huh, okay. I mean,
Did that feel good? Like,
no,
I feel like that would feel
didn't
kind of
it felt a
gross
little
for me. Like,
It did feel gross. It
yeah.
felt weird because I was like, oh, I didn't know that, and that's not something I care about myself, but I'm glad you like it. Like, it would be like if someone was like, I think it's really hot that your hair is brown or something. I'm like, okay, that's just the way it was born, but if
That
you
doesn't
like
have
it,
any
that's
political
cool.
charge.
Well, yeah, but I mean,
I think.
yeah.
Well, maybe a little. There's definitely hair politics where like black hair
Oh my gosh,
comes
yes.
into play.
Any kind of ethnic hair. But
like your height,
Right,
You-
right.
yeah,
Yeah.
people are stereotypically and not as long as we're getting canceled, stereotypes exist for a reason. Women like tall guys, as long as I'm super generalizing, right?
Yes.
And so
No, you can poll women, and the majority of women like tall guys. It's
Right.
like a evolutionary biology
oh
thing.
yeah, I'm just
Come
saying
fight me, Wes.
anytime you say anything about like that sweeping, people get mad. But anyway, so like you don't get to control how tall you are, not without drastic surgery,
Right.
So if you're to get rid of that imbalance or unfair advantage, are you to go get leg reduction surgery? That seems like a huge cost to impose on yourself for having been born to be 6 foot.
I mean, far weirder than the fact that I'm white is that when I lost a lot of weight and actually started being, I don't know, conventionally attractive, I guess, I'd spent my entire life being, the nerd that no one found attractive. And then once that happened, like the difference in the way people treated me, even though I was more or less the same person, was just shocking.
I changed my hair color a lot. I mean, I used to even more before you guys knew me. Like, I'd have a different hair color, and it would be like bright green or bright orange. I went through the like spectrum of colors, and I found that even like having unnaturally dyed hair, people treat you really different if you have green versus red versus black hair.
Right. So, I mean, I guess, height is a form of power in the same way that, like, being attractive is also a form of power. It can get you what you want.
Yeah, attractive tall people get more raises, and more people vote for them, and
they have shorter lifespans, so it evens out.
Yeah, but you can just get people to do what you want more if you're attractive.
Take that,
You're
tall,
like,
pretty
honey,
people.
Once you do that for me, and you're like, fuck yeah, you're hot as shit.
That as long as we're talking about hair, Jace's hair currently is purple and blue and has like is swept to the side with like an undercut. Looks fucking awesome. It's like Cyberpunk 2077.
Yeah. But what does all of this have to do with consent?
That's what I'm curious about. So we're talking about convoluted relationship dynamics, and that's more something that I that's a fun conversation. But I'm curious what the stances were on age and consent that were interesting enough to talk about.
Right now I'm reading an interesting book, which I picked up actually in preparation for this, and maybe our next episode will be about this particular book, about how teens in Western societies are traumatized by how they're infantilized. And I'll get more into that, I guess, in our next episode. But
is it by Jordan Peterson?
it is not. It is actually by a guy who worked directly with B.F. Skinner.
Snowflakes.
Yeah. But no, it's not that.
I'm joking, but I actually think there might be a point there. Yeah.
No, it's a very interesting book. But what I am trying to say is that in the U.S. and maybe in all Western society, I don't know, but definitely in the U.S., relationships between people who are in their teens and people who are in their 20s or older are insanely stigmatized, to the point where, like, when we were recording our episode, Stephen, you made the comment about, like, do you really want to be that guy who's 23 and comes picking up his girlfriend from high school in his car? And, like, no, I don't. That feels gross just thinking about it. But I think it feels gross because of how I was socialized by society, because I can see why a teenager could find someone who is older like that attractive. And not only that, if they weren't a skeevy person, I can see it, like, working out and being just fine. You can learn a lot from an older person. When I first had sex, we were both virgins, and I don't think that was great for either of us. I think we would have been better off if we had started with someone a little bit more experienced.
The person that I was dating, who was much younger than me, told, like, I think I actually brought it up, like, when they asked me out. Like, I was like, there's a weird age gap. Are you sure, like, you're not weirded out by that? And they were like, my parents have a bigger age gap, and, like, they have a great relationship. Yeah. So I'm not worried. And I was like, I never thought of that, because your parents are both old, and I never think of those big different ages.
I have a good intuition pump for this, maybe. Like, I had a friend when I was growing up, and her parents were like 14 years apart. I think that the dad was older, and I had joked, at least they didn't meet when he was in high school, right? So I feel like this is a good intuition pump, because at some point,
that's exactly what I was thinking, though, because, like, at the younger ages, when the people are younger, when the people involved are younger, then, like, it is more skeevy for people. If it's like a 56-year-old and a 46-year-old, nobody would care.
No, that's what I was trying to intuit there, was like, I think, I'm not sure where, and I'm curious where people are coming down on this, if there's a magic line or what the magic number is or whatever.
There's an equation.
But
what your age plus 7.
Well,
yes.
That aside, I'm just thinking, like, I think we can. Is there a baseline? If she was 7 and he was 21, would that be copacetic among everybody or not.
No,
Absolutely
No.
not.
Okay, so
She
so,
hasn't sexually developed yet.
so we have a baseline.
That's definitely pedophilia,
well, I mean,
and that should be a crime.
Sexually
what-
or
what-
emotionally, or like
when you say sexually developed, you just mean like able to menstruate, or like has boobs, or
I mean, those are definitely partial indicators. It's more a question of
there's like physical maturity and like emotional, mental. What's the word I'm looking for? Help me.
like what if she's mentally, and this is getting us too far afield, like if she's mentally mature-ish, whatever a 17-year-old can be mentally mature as, but happens and is
Yeah, say
able
this
to
is
menstruate.
James Potter,
but-
Harry, James Potter, Evans Various, and Professor Snape.
No,
Like-
I'm just thinking like, oh yeah, that'd be a funny introduction poem too, because he's an adult in a kid's body. But I mean, you said no because it's pedophilia. I don't even want to say like that's the reason it's wrong, because like if she was 18 but she happens to look 12, and they were both cool with it, right? And he's 50 and he loves
There are
it
Then
some
it's not
people-
pedophilia.
because of a magic number, because she's 18.
No, because
Because
of
she's a mo-
developmental stages
'Cause she's
in an
developmentally
actual
mature.
human being's
But
life.
Oh, well, see, to me, the pedophilia I thought was less about being, and I'm not an expert on pedophilia. I figured it was more about the physical attraction to the shape of the person that you're into, not about their mind.
the thing.
No.
I think the thing that me and Charlie object to is having a sexual relationship with someone who is not at the developmental stage where they can handle that.
This actually just strikes me as a power imbalance argument.
Okay,
I
so
don't think it
I mean,
is.
from my perspective, I think that's what it is. But
I
what were you
really
saying?
have to interject here. This is something I feel incredibly strong about, okay? As someone who was victimized by actual pedophiles before I had any kind of sexual development in my body or brain whatsoever, someone calling a distasteful arrangement between a 17-year-old young adult pedophilia is infuriating.
I agree.
A 17-year-old has way more agency than a 5-year-old, for example, just throwing numbers out there. And to suggest that they don't is an injustice to actual victims of pedophilia. And it also really harms
It
the
kind of
17-year-old
trivializes
young adult.
pedophilia.
Yeah.
Like,
Ooh, that gets me so upset. And I see it happening in the news. And
when on Tumblr,
So
Well,
it's
I
one of
don't
those
follow
things you
that
can
stuff,
witch hunt
but-
people for. Like, if you draw like
Yeah.
a sexy picture of Steven Universe, but he's aged up to be 18,
yeah.
and you have it tattooed "I am 18" on his chest, people will still call you a pedophile because that's art that's based off of a character from a children's show, and children might be on Tumblr and they might see it because they're looking for Steven Universe art, and then they might traumatize themselves, and it's your fault.
Yeah.
Charlie, how old were you?
Call the
when-
cops.
How old were you when you moved out?
15.
Yeah. So at 15, you had your own job and were paying for your own living expenses.
Yeah. And driving myself to high school and
Yeah.
traveling.
Right. I mean, basically a competent adult. A little bit immature for an adult, but
I was inexperienced.
yeah, inexperienced. That is the word I was looking for.
Yeah. I was never dumb,
Yeah.
but I was definitely inexperienced. And, only time can cure that.
But at the time where you're paying your own rent, I think you can start making some of your own life decisions. And perhaps there will be mistakes, but one of the things I've been banging my drum about for 2 years and have started thinking I should apply to teenagers as well is that people should have the right to be wrong, to make their own mistakes and not have, their choices taken away from them because other people think it's a mistake what you're doing.
This, I think, and I hope I didn't imply some equivocation between 17-year-olds and 40-year-olds and 20-year-olds and 5-year-olds. But people do, and
you did ask, where's the line? And I'm like, oh, I'm really confident there's a line.
Well, so
And I feel very strongly that there should be a legal line and there should be a magical number. Absolutely. We do need to protect children from abuse.
right, and I
And
agree. I think that
we also need to not abuse young adults.
And not all 17-year-olds
like-
are children.
Are you saying by
Possibly
taking
very few.
Are you saying by taking away their agency? You're saying you don't want to abuse young children by sexual trauma, and you don't want to
God,
abuse
this is deep.
17-year-olds by infantilizing them.
I
That
wrote
is where I'm
something
going.
down. Let me find it.
and
I'm just trying to see if that's your point,
Yeah.
Charlie.
So, my point is that consent is everything. Damage is greatest when autonomy is not respected. So, being objectified by others and the reaction of authority figures, peers, family to a young person having sex can be far more harmful than the sex act itself or the sexual relationship.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
I have experienced this. I agreed to get in this because this is really important to me, and I actually have I have things to say, and it's important. I'll just throw out an example. The legal age of consent at the time when I was 14 was 14, and someone would say, well, how can a 14-year-old know if they've been harmed better than an 18-year-old, right? When you're an adult officially, and I was just like. That is absolutely possible. I mean, as a sexually abused child, I had experienced sexual situations and their social, personal repercussions beyond what many older adults had. And if people that were deemed fit to have authority over my person had less experience than I did with how sex affects you, both in a context of with other people and internally. And so I had experienced non-consensual sexual interactions enough to be absolutely certain when I gave consent.
So, but you is the thing, right? And that makes perfect sense. Like,
Charlie,
Yeah, but
I think
the
is
law-
also was a really mature 14-year-old. I think Charlie definitely, probably as you're describing it as a 14-year-old, you could give consent. Other 14-year-olds definitely, I think, were like, I've known 14-year-olds that
Could not have.
that were very, very immature.
Well, the problem is that the presumption is that no 14-year-old can,
Yeah.
and they're all treated that way. And not only are the 14-year-olds barred from making that decision, but anyone that they were to sleep with would then be jailed and
Even if
have
it
their
was,
life
yeah.
permanently ruined due to sex offender registries. And
Yeah.
that is, probably not something the mature 14-year-old wants to happen to
And
their partner.
Yeah, the 14 and the 18-year-old, I think, like, again, I've known 14 and 18-year-olds that have a wide range of, like, emotional ages. And consensual sex, I think, between a 14 and an 18-year-old, like, if you, like, the first part of the law actually sounded really good, where it was, we're going to evaluate the sort of emotional maturity level of these people. And then
That's
they had
not
to throw all
actually the law.
Yeah, then
Yeah,
they had
not
to
at all.
put all that shit in at the end that...
I guess that's
Go
what I'm
ahead.
curious about is how you would possibly do that.
Yeah.
Like, so that's where I think it makes sense to
Yeah.
have magic numbers. It's like,
Yes.
there's nothing that happens, on your 365th day after being 17, at midnight, you're struck by lightning and now you're cognizant enough to sign a loan and vote, right?
Yeah.
It's just we have a number.
Our local laws as they stand are aberrant. They made me sick reading them. I think that is a form of like child abuse in itself, and also just totally abusive young adults.
Yeah, like this actually just part of that law is specifically giving parents the right to veto their children's relationships.
And
Which
it's
is
basically
gross.
it does not recognize that sexual abuse can exist within married couples.
Oh yeah, the
So it
spousal
also-
thing was horrible.
It also
It-
gives the parents the ability to sell their child into
Oh.
a marriage
Basically.
if they're not ready for it.
Yeah.
Is that why that's there?
I don't know, but it churned my stomach reading like the details. So the bigger problem, in my opinion, with the whole consent thing is that
How
the way we are taught to interact and think about sex has a lot of problems because of purity culture, and it's still distorting and distorting sex, and also like just basically hurting everybody.
Yeah,
I don't know how
just
else
making
to put
everything
it.
shitty.
that
Like-
sex is sinful and you shouldn't be allowed to sin until you're of the age of majority.
That sex is only okay in sanctioned arrangements between X and Y, and only under these circumstances, and the laws reinforce this.
And sex
as
is
they're
still
written.
kind of gross, but we can't really prohibit you from doing it. Like
Okay,
at this
and then
stage.
there's the sexual double standards that come from purity culture because of pregnancy and fatherhood and legitimacy, and it just you can dig this, you can be lost in a well and never see sunlight again if you just dig to the bottom of this. But regret does not equal abuse, and we need to demythologize how we present sex to everyone, not just children. This myth that sex is somehow implies this deeper relationship between the people that have sexual contact, false. The fact that sex is only okay and not harmful under certain situations,
that
like
sex is
that are
inherently
socially
traumatizing,
condoned,
too.
Yeah.
false. Like, yeah, the fact
I've
that
also
there's
been raped a bunch of times.
Yeah.
And I hate that, like, there's people that I can't convince that, like, I'm okay about it now. Like, Actually, like that wasn't the worst thing that's ever happened to me. Like it's bad, but like you know what? Like I don't want to be like treated like oh abuse victim, pat pat. Oh we can't say like things around. Like I don't
Yeah.
I don't want to be treated like a survivor of like 9/11 or something. I don't
Yeah.
fucking know because I'm like yeah that happened. It was bad. Like I've processed it. I've moved on.
Richard Dawkins got in some water some years and years ago when he disclosed that when he was a child, he said he was mildly raped or
Was
something.
this something about elevator gate?
Maybe I don't
It
know
might
when
have
this
come
came
out
out,
around it.
I
but
think it was years
After-
later.
I think it was
at
after
least
that,
a couple
yeah.
years after.
But I think
you know,
he'd already sort of been like in this position of sorry that you should finish your thought.
I was going to say, apparently he was like in the back seat of a car and a priest felt him up, under his pants. And when he was a kid, he just processed that as yucky and it was nothing.
Yeah.
Like it was weird, not literally nothing, but it was like, that was gross. All right, I'm going to go home and do whatever British kids do, right?
Go shower now.
Yeah, or maybe not even that. Maybe it wasn't even that kind of yucky. It was just weird, and he went home and played video games or whatever the British equivalent of that was 70 years ago. Like I guess I bring that up because I'm making up. No, I don't know. I'm just
okay.
I brought that up because you were saying that like you didn't like people shoving you in a box and
Yeah.
necessitating that this was the worst thing that happened to you
the-
when yours was obviously way worse. I'm assuming way worse, but like it didn't define you as a person, right? And so like the reason that I brought up Dawkins was because as soon as he talked about this, people were like, oh, that's why you hate religion, and it's like, no, I have other reasons. This wasn't even didn't make the top 50, right? So I not really making much of a point there other than
Yeah, that was unfortunate because he brought that up to invalidate I think somebody like he'd been having the elevator gate like argument for a while, and this was just really disappointing for me because Richard Dawkins was like my hero at the time, and it was Rebecca Watson, who was one of the other hosts on the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe,
And
had
she was
mentioned
fantastic.
she's yeah
Still,
I miss her.
still miss her. Yeah.
And she had like a creepy guy trying to hit
Creepy
on her in
it-
an elevator.
read as not hot.
Oh God, we're gonna have to have
I know,
our own
right?
episode about Elevator Gate.
No, let's-
Elevator
I-
Gate. If we get any
I-
deeper into this.
I'm prepared to leave the show if we're going to do an episode about Elevator Gate.
Sir Stephen draws the line.
So I
can shut up about it. Soon
no.
because-
I don't want to shut down that part of the conversation. I'm also just wondering how far afield that's getting us from
It's getting
anything
us a bit too far.
interesting
afield.
worth talking about. If
we're
anyone's
talking about,
curious about
like-
Elevator Gate, I'm sure there's a volume of internet articles on it, the height of your house. So
The only reason I wanted to bring it up is because that was just my memory of like the moment when I was like, "No, Dawkins."
Oh,
I
feel like
see.
a bunch of my idols all like at the time I like found out shit about them, and I would like remember writing in my journal like, "No more heroes, like no gods, no heroes, no something."
That's a dope ass thing
Fair.
to put in your diary. Also,
Sounds like a title for a novel. Needs to be written. No
No,
gods,
there's-
no heroes.
It's from something, and I'm not getting the quote right, but anyway.
there's a Scott Alexander post recently, "The Rise and Fall of Online Culture Wars." That doesn't talk
That
about
was so
Elevator Gate,
interesting.
but it talks like this Elevator Gate happened in the middle of all this stuff.
Okay.
And so I mean, it was interesting. This was just a weird time in internet history too.
but
I want to lead up to what I have to say about the age of consent because I think context is important. So I was sexually abused by several adults and many other children, both repeatedly and in random, like single occurrences on a regular basis from about the age of 4 to 13. And all of these encounters involve some form of violence, intimidation, threats. Some were within, sometimes it was like the individuals on their own, and sometimes multiple offenders worked in concert.
oh Jesus,
Okay, no one who abused me was punished legally or extra legally, like by society in any fashion. Okay? I, however, was punished for being a victim consistently. I was socially ruined
What were you wearing?
and emotionally
5-year-old?
devastated by the time I was 6. As a sexual abuse survivor, I was thrust into a world where there was clearly no safe harbor or refuge because of rape culture, victim blaming, all this purity shit. I was unable to escape being re-victimized and abused until I moved away at 17. I had to literally move away from the community to be treated like a human being. And that scarred me way worse than the physical violence and the sexual assaults ever did. The fact that I was treated so poorly as a result of being preyed upon was fucking devastating. Like I have like 2 examples of icky relationships like that people would condemn these men for that I'd like to share contextually because it means a lot to me. Like
Yeah, we're listening.
so that I can summarize
Yeah, please do.
like why I would feel so strongly about this. So I will make it as brief as I can. So these situations would be illegal under current Colorado law, but I grew up in Hawaii, which had different laws at the time. So I was 15. I met a 20-year-old that I wanted to have sex with. He was interested in me until he found out I was 15, and he mentioned he didn't want to end up in jail because we dated. Fair. So being the nerd I was, I went to the library, and with the help of the librarian, I found the law books, and I started researching. Okay? I found the pertinent statutes, I photocopied them, I highlighted the relevant sections, I brought them to him, and I showed him the statutes, explained to him that I understood the law, I reassured him about his concerns, and yeah, that was a precious moment. So we continued dating. I
actually had to do that with my first sexual partner too because
hey, congrats.
he was younger than
Yay,
me.
Nerds. So we continued dating for about a year. He moved away. Then I traveled to Florida to visit him once. He proposed marriage shortly after that visit. I said no. I didn't hear from him again until I was 19 when he moved back to the island. We dated again for about 4 months, and then I realized I'd outgrown him, and I ended things. When I was 15, later after that other guy moved away, I met a 31-year-old man at a party, and I told him my age. 31.
Okay.
No, you were
15.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Same
you were
year.
15, he was 31.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I told my age before he exchanged contact information, and he lived on Oahu, a different island. I lived on the Big Island. So we chatted on the phone, called each other for about a month or so, even exchanged a couple letters, just kind of getting acquainted. Maybe 8 weeks had passed, and I heard there was a concert on Oahu. So I asked him if he'd like to go with me. He agreed to come. He asked me if I wanted to stay with him for a long weekend at his place. We didn't talk about having sex, but I knew he wanted to, and I was interested. So he picked me up at the airport. We had a great time. I insisted on safe sex. He complied without complaint, and I enjoyed him so much I visited him about a month later, and then we never saw each other. And, you know, a lot of people, in comparison to the ways the sexual touch was experienced for me outside of those examples, my relationships with those 2 men were some of the healthiest encounters that I had as a young adult. And they stood out to me because I gave consent, I pursued, versus not giving consent or being asked for consent. I was also treated with respect by both men. They protected me from pregnancies and STDs. It was either my idea or their suggestion. Both men spent non-sexual time with me and invested me as a person by sharing experiences. I was treated like a person versus an object, whereas by everyone else, I was an object. And I was also not defamed by either of these people when I decided to end the relationship. They didn't go around calling me names, telling people I was a whore or an easy lay or any of the stuff that my abusers did, by the way. And I still think of them fondly, both of them. And I hope that they aren't traumatized by their relationship with me. And I absolutely do not feel that way about anyone else I had sexual encounters with before I was a young adult. I don't have any kind feelings towards any date rapists or sexual predators I've encountered in my lifetime. And it all comes down to my consent being respected. And if the law doesn't respect my ability to consent, that's a problem for everyone. It creates more problems and trauma. Absolutely.
This is different than our usual thing in which we talk about heavy stuff, but it's all this nice, navel-gazy, distant armchair stuff. Not talking about somebody who's been through some shit, right? And not talking to somebody about that and then saying, well, let's abstract that away and think about it distantly. So I don't know if I'm prepared to engage too much on it just because I don't know exactly how to navigate that. I can try, but again, it's different. If we're talking about some obscure, whatever. We were talking before about, the death of everybody on a continent, and that's like, oh, nothing, right? Yeah, okay. And now we're talking about, one small, stupid, or maybe not so small, but one stupid law, and now it's suddenly a big it is a big deal because it's more salient and close.
When I was talking with Charlie about this 4 weeks ago when it first came up, I was having the same sorts of qualms and opinions as you, like where, yes, there are young adults who can and should be able to consent and sign legal contracts and all that, but as a society we have this law that draws a line at a number because it's easier that way, and
We don't have a mind reading machine yet.
well,
Like,
I mean,
there's not
you
like a
don't
meter
even
you can stick against someone's head that says emotionally mature or not, like on a spectrum.
I don't
so-
think the laws are based on
No,
that.
clearly not.
that at
Yeah.
all. I think they're based
Well,
on
the first half
cultural
of it
norms.
was.
And I think a lot of the laws are based on, now that I've been reading this book, are based on the explicit intention to control young adults.
Yeah, and commodification of them.
Yeah.
Well,
that
one of them is specifically there, like clearly, so parents can veto their children's relationships. That's awful.
Yeah.
It
and
is.
and like and so I had the same
Parents
problem.
are basically anybody who disapproves. Actually,
I still think it's going to be an issue to change society about this thing,
Hell
but I
yeah.
think it's a good fight now that I've been reading this book because, like, the guy proposes an actual method of measuring emotional maturity in
is it not
people.
the equation?
Sounds like I should read the book.
I actually think the equation. What was it? Half your.
No, it's not the equation.
No, what was it though?
Half your age plus 7.
Yeah, right. I actually feel like it's better than the law we have now, right? Like, Charlie, would you would you agree that if half your age plus 7, like if the person is older than that, then like that's still big of an age gap?
Then she couldn't have sex with a 31-year-old dude.
So, I don't like any of these fucking formulas.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
But we do need a bottom age. And
agree with that.
think that looking at like physiological and social development, we should come up with an age, and like I think it should be 14 or 15. And I also think that the law has to be explicit so that it can be enforced.
I think that's
However, that doesn't work in reality when you're dealing with something as complex as
I think there
competency
actually should at
and
least
maturity.
be like a panel of judges or something. Like
I-
have them have
yeah.
a psychologist.
I mean, there is
So
ways you
perhaps-
can measure
them.
people's competency.
Yeah.
Right. So I think
It would
that
be
the law
expensive, though.
should have a hard age bracket where competency can be called into question, and this is how you resolve the question.
And it doesn't
Right now, the young adult has no agency, and they are deemed incompetent by the law, and that's
and they have literally no
Not
rights.
okay.
Well,
It's just
there's one or
not
two
okay.
special rights carved out for them, but they don't have any of the rights that are afforded to most adults under the Constitution.
They're
And
not considered full humans yet.
exactly, yeah, you
Yeah.
are still your parents' property, more or
The
less.
law's really like, and if you take into account like drinking age, I always found it hilarious that I think a lot of people do. You can, I think, when you're 18, can you join the military?
Yeah, they actually
you can-
lowered the drinking age no, they lowered the voting age to 18 because
Okay,
it
but
used to
you
be,
still can't drink until you're
you still
21.
can't drink
You
till
can
you're 21.
die.
Yeah.
You can go overseas and kill people and die when you're 18, but you can't have a beer.
Although apparently those drinking laws are rarely enforced on military bases. The age.
Well, I should hope not, because
yeah.
if you're 18 and you've been sent overseas to go kill people and die, you should at least be able to have a beer.
Yeah, I mean, there's you said that it would be very expensive to test competency, but I don't think it would be that expensive. Like, we test people's competency at operating a fucking 2-ton vehicle that
don't
hurdles
think
at
that's-
60 miles per hour.
but
down
we
the
don't do
highway.
it well.
Well, I'm sure we don't do it great, but we do it well enough.
I don't
No,
think-
we don't. Oh, and whether or not we do, like, I mean, I'm not trying to. I'm kind of putting a foot down on this because I don't think that measuring competency is a thing that is doable in general and solves the problem. Like, that's why you
I think
have-
having something in place, like have a psychologist analyze the person and give their verdict, would be at least better than what we have now.
it maybe, but then you get a psychologist who hates black people, and so whenever
Yeah.
the
Get a
guy is
second
black.
opinion.
Well, but then how many opinions do you get to have? Like, so that's the thing is that
The fact
that's
that
what makes
it's
this
not
that's what makes
perfect, I
this
think-
really hard and convoluted. Where, like, if you just say, look, if they're not 18, they don't get to do it. Whatever it is, drink, whatever.
I mean,
like,
I could see a law that, like, once you are 18, you can no longer be denied your competency rights no matter what.
see, that sounds
But-
stupid too. But by the same metrics, right? Why do you suddenly become competent on your 18th if you can be competent on when you're 17?
This goes into what I want to say in 2 weeks, but my personal metric is kind of, once you can cause problems to the political machine by taking up arms, that's when they have to start considering you competent, and that is why there is so much effort put into suppressing teenagers right
Of course,
now.
this is Ilyash's opinion.
Yeah,
I
of
love
course,
it.
this is my opinion, yes.
How often did you like daydream about just like storming the government as a child?
Very often. But it wasn't the government, because it wasn't the government
was it, like,
oppressing
your
me.
teachers or something?
Yeah, it was teachers, it was
Yeah.
parents, it was the people that were actually
And
holding
fucking
me
authority
back.
figures. Actually, Charlie brought up about Puritanism. I grew up in a town that was settled by Puritans, and still, the place I went to school actually has drinking prohibited because they kept the Puritan laws. The section in we were forced they were forced to teach us sex ed because of a law, but because of I think school boards and parents objecting, they took the textbooks and they ripped out the sections about contraception.
Oh.
So they're denying you agency,
Because
basically
they
the
thought that-
ability to make decisions for yourself.
They thought that if their
by
teenage children had
limiting
knew that you
information.
could have sex safely, then they would do it.
Well, I mean, they weren't wrong necessarily.
They're not wrong, but they're still going to do it anyway. But they're
Yes.
going to get STIs and pregnancies.
What's fun about that is they put on like the big slide where it's like, here's all the consequences of having unprotected sex,
Yep, that was how
STDs,
they taught it.
pregnancies, and then here's all the consequences when you have sex with a condom. They click the slide and nothing changes, and so like all they're doing there is making a great argument for raw dogging it, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh hey, in for a penny, in for a pound, right?
Right.
If wearing a condom does nothing, I might as well not wear one.
Yeah.
Like I guess for
I'm
me,
going to hell already anyway. On slide 5, it shows me burning in hell. So.
right. There's wasn't that one of the
Nihilism.
things in Unsong? You know, if you've already sinned, which everyone has, you're basically going to hell no matter what. So like, just go all out. And if you Hitler hard enough, then you get an awesome place in hell. So anyway, I guess I don't understand quite what it would mean to have these competency measures that could be exercised in a consistent way. Like, you know, I mean, what agency does a 15-year-old have? I don't think that they have the grasp, and it depends on the 15-year-old, which is why you have magic numbers that are usually after 15 for stuff. But like, you don't let a 15-year-old sign on a student loan that'll sum to $120,000, right?
But you let a 17-year-old do it, as John Mulaney has
Yeah,
hilariously pointed out.
I think that for those, you tend to have adult cosigners, right? And so, like,
maybe.
for I know
But
that
as he pointed out, that when he signed it at 17, he had no fucking clue what it meant.
I think
You know,
but he's also a comedian, like telling a joke. I think that he had to have a parent there to co-sign it.
It's
And
because
whether
we're
he-
so grossed out by sex that we couldn't have like a parent co-sign.
Well, so that's what I'm saying. That
or
might
something
that might
like
be an argument
approve of
here,
a
but we also
relationship.
have there's also been an issue raised with parents like owning their kids. But I'm
Yeah.
also kind of hugely in favor of that. Like,
Well, I
if
think
you're
it should
if you're a
have to be
stupid
parent.
kid who
Like,
doesn't want to
say
get
any adult, if you could co-sign. If you could get any adult to co-sign that you're emotionally mature enough to have a relationship, like, or
I mean-
maybe like teachers, or I don't know.
that might be something, but then you'd still be like at the whim of your parents. But like so part of me likes that, because being at the whims of your parents, because like if you're a stupid kid who doesn't want to get vaccinated because you think needles are scary, or because you're an anti-vax lunatic and you're
But you
and
can
you're
talk
11,
about that because like sex is so gross that you can't talk about it.
sure. But I guess
reason that, like,
whatever my kids' reasons are for not wanting to get a vaccine, I'd be like, tough shit. You're not dying of measles in this house, young man. Like
So you're talking about a 9-month-old.
Well, whatever. Let's pretend it's a vaccine you get at 11, right? Where we all agree they're too young for sex and they're all too young to sign mortgages or loans, but old enough to talk, right? So I mean, I guess
I guess once you start getting into your teens, 13, 14, you start getting more responsibilities. And if you do make the wrong choices, sometimes you just have to let people make the wrong choices. The same way we let people vote for the other party, or
Take out a
go
loan.
to church, or take out a loan, yeah, or go gambling, or take drugs, because you can't run other people's lives for them that much, and the amount of control you can have over other people's lives should start diminishing in your early teens and diminish more as you get older and you show greater responsibility. Not just be like, you're an infant all the way till you're 18, and then suddenly, boom, go wild. Like, that's just a recipe for disaster on both sides of that 18-year-old line.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, and this is getting us away from the age and consent stuff, but it's like, you know, I can't control what my friends do because we're all adults, and that's part of what's involved with that. But if I had a kid who was 15, old enough to drive, not legally, old enough to drink, not legally, and I don't want to take away their agency, you know, to get shithoused and drive home from 60 miles away. like, oh no, I don't want to impute on their ability to make their own decisions, and then they kill a family of 4 and 2 of the people in the car were pregnant, right? Like,
Like
it's
an adult could do
This
that
is
too.
why
I know, but
we have
but,
separate
but
laws
as,
about.
but as a parent, I think you have an obligation to be not just like the cosigner on loans and stuff for a kid, and to make sure they get enough food. You're to steward them into a safe and responsible adulthood.
Yeah, but what you were describing is negligence. Someone wouldn't just say, go do whatever.
But you
guide them.
But you do that by taking away their agency.
No.
This makes me
So,
think of.
I wouldn't let
like,
them make that mistake.
This is why we have separate laws for the age of sexual consent that we do for driving, joining the military. This is not the same issue. And I think that like legally and ethically, we're wasting our time trying to compare them. They're not the same.
I did acknowledge that they weren't the same, and then went
yeah,
on to go ahead
yeah.
and talk about it. You're right.
Yeah. And like, we all, of course, we want to protect children, especially as a parent, you want to protect your child. Like, but the other thing is that we all make decisions without the ability to truly understand the repercussions of the choices we make, because none of us can predict the future. We all have made decisions we regret and will continue to make mistakes in the future. It's reasonable to expect people to make better decisions as they gain knowledge and experience with age, however, implying that underage people have no ability to make decisions, or that it's not okay for them to make mistakes. That treating sex as though the cost of having it is so high, we just have to absolutely slap that off the table, is ridiculous. It's damaging and it's ridiculous. And like, regret does not equal abuse. That's part of the mythology of sex. Like, oh, this person abused me because the relationship ended poorly, or they don't love me anymore. It's like that is part of like the romanticization of sex. Sex is not the same thing.
They actually have laws about abortion based on the idea that they said you will regret having an abortion.
Yes. Hey, I tried to get
that's
sterilized
just infantilizing all
as a
women.
young woman. I
Right
tried
of
in
age.
my 20s. I tried in my late 20s. I tried again in my 30s. And all in like all
They're
three
like, "But you might
times.
change your mind.
All three times I was given absolutely no agency over my own goddamn body, because someone else might feel bad if I regretted my decision or get sued. And it was like, oh, I'm sorry, you're female and you don't really know what you want. Biology says you must breed, and then we can sterilize you. And I'm like,
That's them not treating you like an adult until you're in
yes!
your 30s.
Sure.
but there's no, they like,
That's literally it.
I was way beyond 18.
That's not
but
having bodily autonomy.
I don't want to get on that subject. I'm just saying that this does tie into the fact that the commodification of the female body, purity culture, is tied into the way we think about sex and treat young adults. And when they're exploring sex, they are exploring sex.
Yeah.
And we need to provide them with guidance and support and treat them in ways that are healthy for them, not make it a traumatizing experience where someone gets thrown in jail or they feel like they're supposed to be upset because they were raped, apparently.
Yeah. Also,
Like,
their whole life is
They call it
ruined,
statutory
regardless
rape.
of whether they were raped or the rapist. Like,
Yes! Oh my god, yes!
I think
Like,
this also has further bad knock-on effects because, like, I would not consider dating anyone in their teens or even at this point, probably their early 20s. And the thing is, like, some teens will still want relationships with older people, and I think some teens would even benefit from relationships with good older people. But since all the good older people are like, fuck that, I'd be creepy if I was dating a teen, even if it was legal in the state. I'm not going to do it. So the only people left that are willing to date teens are the people who are abusive and will exploit that power rather than, you know, helping someone and being kind and accommodating like your partners were.
yeah, that's why we're creating problems.
I think we're also talking about a lot of stuff. Like
Yeah.
the sterilization thing, even as a guy, it's hard to get sterilized. And it's probably harder as a woman because people suck. But like
Well,
the main reason for that is the doctor doesn't want you to come back 5 years later and be like, he should have talked me out of it. I regret my decision. And it's their fault. They made me infertile. Like,
Liabiliphobia.
right. So, I mean, I think some part of it maybe is no doubt, some puritanical sex bullshit. But it's really, I think, in large part, that particular thing is just fear of getting sued. But
No, it's worse
Okay.
for women. Like, there's no laws against guys getting a form of birth control in their hands, but there's people trying to make it illegal for women to even have access to birth control, and there's countries where women can't.
Right, they suck. I wasn't saying that wasn't an issue.
Yeah.
I mean,
Stephen was saying that it's not just sex purity, but there's other.
But it needs to be
things like
recognized as a
litigiousness.
driving force behind these laws, and the way we like. So your revulsion when you like see a 17-year-old with a 20-something-year-old, like you don't know that 17-year-old or that 20-something-year-old. It's. I think it would be healthy for people to like internally be self-aware. Okay, I'm judging them based on what exactly? I am for this law because, well, it just sounds good. I mean, 17-year-olds shouldn't be fucked by people in their 20s. Slow down.
when you said internally self-aware, I don't understand how that applies to laws, because you can't have that with laws.
They're
right?
bad laws.
Well, I mean, like, I mean, laws are. We should have had our resident lawyer on to explain, but
What laws are?
Well, I mean, but in general, I think that they are, you know, they are cut and they're supposed to be cut and dry. Here, this is the case, and sorry, you know, discretion. We can argue about that in court, maybe, but for the most part, like, you know,
agree, but I think
if someone walked in and Jace was wrist deep in my abdomen while I was unconscious and doing an appendectomy on me, unlicensed, you'd probably be in trouble. Because
I'm just imagining Steven being like, "It's okay, this is consensual."
At least,
what if it was an emergency appendectomy?
right? But I think running in and arresting Jace would be a great idea. And you could make your case in court and be exonerated. But like, because in general we see, oh look, this is happening, we should put a stop to this. And most of the time that's the right call to make, right?
Well,
so
partially the consent laws don't, or the age of consent laws don't allow for consent. If you had consented that appendectomy, it wouldn't matter. Jace would still go to jail because law says your consent doesn't matter. But more importantly, I think the problem is that the age is just set way too high. Like, set the age lower, because 17, 18, that's a ridiculously high age for people who want to fulfill one of the basic drives of biology at an earlier age.
I think you can still like accuse someone of rape, even like if you're legally, you know, this just gives you the ability to consent.
Yeah.
Like if you're 14 and you're raped by a 20-something, you could still go to the cops and say I was raped, but like, you know,
In
you
fact,
couldn't
they'd
be arrested.
probably be more likely to believe you if you had some sort of established agency.
Yeah.
You know, but as a kid, it's like, yeah. So, you know, I was born in the late 70s and raised in the 80s, 90s. So, I don't think much has changed, honestly. I see it all the time.
Age of consent laws have gone up in some places. This is the major change.
So we've regressed. Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think things have actually gotten worse since the 60s or the 70s. Like,
yeah.
maybe actually, I'm not sure about that. I think some things have gotten better and some have gotten worse in this domain. Where I'm curious about how the laws fluctuated too.
Yeah, that'd be something to research.
I wonder what the first if I had thought to research stuff for this episode, like it would have been interesting to know like what the first age of consent law was, like where it was initiated, what the circumstances were, and what the age was. I could probably find that on Wikipedia real quick, but my laptop's all the way over there.
I think we kept getting muddled down on what I tried to separate out at the beginning and then totally forgot to keep doing, which was like separate the law from what makes sense and what we should be doing, because those might not be the same thing. You know, and giving agency to kids at a younger age maybe makes sense in some contexts and not in others.
I think it should depend on the kid.
Well, yeah, and so like ideally, like Jay said, we'd have a magic wand that we could wave over somebody's head and say they are sentient enough to make this decision and they're cognizant enough of their consequences, but we don't have that.
Look,
so
how do we? Are you 30 now?
Yeah, I've been 30 for a couple of years.
He had to think about
Okay,
it.
gee, I don't know, man. I met you when you were in your late 20s, and so
No,
that's the
you're
age
good.
you are forever in my mind.
Oh, how nice.
He also looks very young.
Yes, that too.
Yeah,
But-
I have a face that says, "Can I please check your ID, sir?"
So, yes, very much. So we don't have that wand, and we can't wave it over your head. How the hell do we know that you're sentient enough to consent to sex?
So that
How
raises
do we
one
know
of the
you're not a
nuanced
pea zombie?
that raises one of the nuanced points I was going to make here. Like, you know, there's a couple of I think interesting edge cases with this, and I maybe can get them both out quick enough, and then we can talk about them. One, I knew a guy a few years ago. He's at a college party, and it's not a 19-year-old level college party. They're 23, right? You know, they're seniors. And girl comes up and, hey, you wanna hook up? Totally. And a week later, he gets a call from her parents. She was 17, and he's fucked, right? So what's interesting, and I don't know if I think that she even had a fake school ID, and so
Wow.
like
So she went out of her way to like
to make this because she
tried to claim agency for herself,
she
I
thought
guess.
she had the authorship, and she maybe did. She certainly had the authorship to get a fake ID, and we could make this as detailed as we want because
How
somewhere
about if
you
you're
know.
old enough to fake an ID
But-
reliably, that means that you're competent.
The law
So-
doesn't care.
So that's one, and then like
That's a good.
on the other end of that, I know people in their 60s who aren't competent enough to.
If they're not competent enough to fake an ID in their 60s, they probably shouldn't be having sex either.
Well, but that's interesting because they're allowed to. I'm speaking particularly people with mental handicaps.
Mm.
You know,
God, that's a
people
whole
with their
topic
IQ in the
itself.
in the 70s or whatever.
Obviously,
IQ is a
that
rough
would
thing.
need to be included in the law.
I don't understand
and
what
I
you
don't,
mean.
I don't see that it is.
What would need to be included and how?
Um,
Like I'm thinking. Let me finish the example.
Sure.
I know of a couple that got married and presumably copulated that marriage at some point, right? Or consummated, or whatever you want to call it, and they're of equal-ish level, right?
Right.
They're both handicapped.
Yep.
Like if it's about agency and adulthood and cognition, these people shouldn't be allowed to have sex. We should sterilize them, or at least keep them away from each other and put them in chastity belts. I'm being absurd, but like you see what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
Like if they're
That's what some people think.
if it's magically about I guess take away the absurd bit about chastity belts and distance, but like it does seem like we can't let it's an inconsistent metric. I think that if they're both if they're neither of them can read and write, they can't prepare their whatever, they can't live a life independent of help, but if they want to hook up, fuck it. Like there are people in old folks homes who presumably they're
Well,
rife with
they
STDs.
get police too.
They do, and I kind of think they should because there's a lot of dementia going on and a lot of people
It
unable
depends on
to.
the person, though.
Right.
Like they're,
But
that should be in the law. I think that's what Charlie's saying, right? Like
I'm saying that
That
the
it's
law
also-
doesn't.
you
The
also
law
don't
as
have the
it's
ability to consent if you have a
currently-
certain level of dementia, and that should be
Yeah,
in the law
like,
too. That should
Just
be protected
because it's not
status.
addressed
But old people
doesn't
should be
mean
allowed
it
to have
shouldn't
sex.
be. And I'm not saying there shouldn't be specific age. I never said there shouldn't be a specific age. I'm just saying that simply naming an age is not enough. And I'm actually agreeing with you because there's other ways that you can be competent or incompetent. And we need to address all of that.
Yeah, and also
Because
the you weren't
People,
done.
yeah, because context matters.
right,
It
and
absolutely matters. And if we are actually going in the interest of being just, we need to fix this. Our current laws are egregious. At
we're back
best.
on laws. Laws suck.
Yeah.
So I think we can table that and just
Okay.
agree.
Here.
Because
Well, but does that mean you agree that 16-year-olds could have sex and it wouldn't be gross?
well, so that's sort of where I'm at. Like if again these two mentally handicapped people. I mean, again, the state saw them fit to get married. They have a marriage certificate, and I'm assuming that the state, again, if they let them sign a marriage certificate, had no problems with them having sex. So, like, what they probably would hopefully object to is an fully able-minded person, marrying a person who with severe mental handicaps and having sex with them, right? Because they're not on the same level, right? Two 16-year-olds are close enough to the same level as opposed to a 46-year-old and a 16-year-old on average, right? Like, and I realize that there's nuance and it doesn't.
I
And
don't
I might
You
not be
can-
making a coherent case.
Like, I don't
but-
think they
No,
even have to be
I
on the same
disagree.
level. You can be
Yeah.
on different levels, but still consent to sex.
So
I
I wonder though. I mean, I guess
Yeah,
maybe.
actually, I think I see where Steven's
calling
coming from.
an adolescent mentally handicapped.
I wasn't.
Well, no, but like it's equating it.
No, it wasn't. I didn't.
Oh,
To make it
okay.
clear, I'm saying that there is a level of cognitive ability that grows through adolescence.
Yes.
That you don't have at 10, that you do have at 20. And some people never get past where you are at 10,
That's
and we call them
true.
developmentally disabled.
Yeah.
So whatever it is that's coming along at that age, that is.
I don't think you guys are disagreeing with each other here.
I don't think so either. I just didn't like
sounds
that.
like you're both
I was
saying that,
equivocating.
like-
I wasn't saying
Oh.
that kids were mentally handicapped. Anyway, I guess I sort of was, but I was drawing an analogy. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think where you were headed was like the you're trying to come up with an example of the like mental competency of someone in their 60s versus someone who is in their teens, and I'm like, oh, that's you can't draw a straight line between those 2 points.
There's more going on there. Like,
Yeah.
if you have dementia, maybe you have like the mental faculties of someone who's 14, but you have a fully developed body, like physiologically. God damn it.
I mean, we can skip the dementia part because that maybe takes it too high. What if they're both in their, two developmentally disabled people who
What if
are
it's just
exactly
someone really
40,
stupid?
and
It's funny.
and they're what was that?
I was just joking. I was just saying they're not, well, mentally handicapped, just really stupid.
No, I like the I guess because they're cognitively about where you could test with an aptitude test or something, a cognition test, whatever you want to call it. They'd gauge around 10, right?
Can you?
So like at that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, nothing. I had a random thought. Keep going.
It's fine. I'm not. I don't know if I'm making a good point here.
Well, I was gonna say, drugs retard your mental capacity for periodically for a time, and does that mean you can't consent? Because I mean, if that's the case, I've been on LSD and like been raped and or raped people at the same time.
So I mean, and the extreme example, people often give people drugs to have sex with them so they can't consent, right?
Yes, and
So-
that's fucked up.
But you need to
So
be able to
that's
distinguish
obvious.
between those two.
And yeah,
Like-
you can distinguish between those two. And I think the easy solution to your example is like you pre-commit whilst sober, saying, I'm going to alter my consciousness through substance use, and I am open to doing whatever we want to do at that point, whether it's sex or not or whatever. And I'm consenting to that while I'm sentient and on planet Earth, right?
Right.
Like that doesn't sound like a hard problem.
Right. But so you could still have sex with someone who was on LSD without it being evil or bad or whatever.
Because, well, I think if you ask them when they weren't on LSD, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that like if this, it seems like in the example, then the analogy would be if this person who's mentally handicapped at 40 could turn it off for long enough
Well,
to
no.
say I consent to sex and then turn it back on and they're disabled again.
Yeah. No. I guess. Sorry, that's a bad analogy.
No, you're good.
Like I said, it came out of nowhere, and I probably shouldn't have jumped in with that.
It's fine because it's a
Exploring the edge cases is where you figure out where the edges are.
yeah.
But like when Stephen was saying, like people are on two different levels when they're in their teens and their 40s. Like I agree. I think that Charlie at 15 and her lover at 31 were definitely at different developmental levels, but I don't think that relationship was problematic. It was.
I don't know if Charlie doesn't. I mean, yeah,
So like you can be on different levels and still have good relationships as long as, you're not a bad person. If you take the other person into consideration and treat them like a person and be decent.
That was my point entirely, where the objectification, commodification of adolescence is really what the problem is.
And maybe it's also just a general thing with age gaps. I mean, I'm in my 30s, if I hung out in front of junior high schools just to make friends.
Oh God.
No,
don't.
I'm just saying. Like, there's no sex
think
involved.
this is-
No, honestly,
I
I
feel
wish
like
we
I'm-
lived in a world where that
Where you
was
could do that,
possible
yeah.
without a negative societal assumption and repercussions. I would love to have teenage friends.
I would hate to have teenage friends. So that's the point I was making. And
I have great teenage friends.
and don't get me wrong, we're allowed to. This is more of a values difference, but I don't think teenagers have anything interesting that I like talking about, right?
Really? I had a co-host at Metamore who was in her teens.
Not cognitively. We're gonna pretend. Yeah.
Oh,
All right,
I
yeah.
see. Okay, so
All right, but-
April doesn't
Ha ha.
count.
I'm jesting. I know. I don't have a good answer for that. And I guess what I'm meaning is that like I am glad I'm not the kind of person to go out and troll the junior high schools looking for buddies, right?
Right, and that's
But
in my
but that,
opinion, that's still creepy as fuck.
but
although
that's
apparently
just a me
that's
thing.
just the two of us, and
and it would be nice if society, I remember,
So
we
when I
had a
was-
friend who likes kids,
Yeah.
in a non-sexual way. If you say they like kids, you have to qualify that. And
Which
he
is
even
awful.
said he loves getting hugs from like his nephews or something. And he's like, kid hugs are great.
find
I was
that
I was
really
I was at a
sad, too,
3-year-old's
that,
birthday
like-
party
Yeah.
yesterday, and I didn't get any hugs because she was busy. My niece was playing with this giant foam machine, but little hugs from little kids are adorable. It's
When I was 15, I had a mentor who was, I'm not sure exactly, 10, 11 years older than me. And like, it was such a good relationship. And I learned so much. I grew a lot through that. My mother absolutely hated her, even though she never met her. It was almost entirely a e-relationship. But she was like, oh, this creepy older lady that's creeping on you. And yeah, I totally developed a crush. And, I would have loved to have sex with her if I could. I couldn't because first of all, she thought that I was, a teenager, which would be weird. She wasn't attracted to me, but also she was total lesbian. So 2 layers of not being attracted to me there.
And might as well have been 5,000 miles away, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, she was just in a different part of Denver, but yeah.
That's 1,000 miles
But
when
you
you're
don't have a
15.
car.
Exactly. Yeah. I had a bike, man. But
It's very hilly.
I did actually end up going to her place once when she had like a gathering of nerds over to watch Xena stuff and then some alien movies.
That sounds cool.
Yeah, it was a great time. And like she was really awesome to me, and it was a great thing in my life. And if things had been different and I would have been able to sleep with her, I don't know, it probably wouldn't have been terrible. And I have a hard time imagining that kind of world because it's just so not the relationship we had. Like from the very beginning, she was like, "Oh, that's really cute." The one time when I was like, "I think I really love you," and she's like, "Oh, that's so adorable."
And how old were you?
I was like 15.
I mean, so if she had said, "I love you too, let's fuck," I mean, were you consenting to that? Like, it's interesting, right?
It is
Like,
interesting.
So, and I'm not saying that
I don't
that
think
anyone
it should necessarily be an evil, considered to be an awful thing.
What if she had asked, "Can I borrow, what your parents are putting away a college fund for you? Can I borrow it?" Like,
See, that is much more likely to be very exploitative.
but I mean, if you're not cognizant enough to lend somebody $100, are you cognizant enough to? And I'm not. This isn't a question I expect an answer to.
Yeah.
And I should be clear. I'm not sure if it's obvious. If this is your first episode, I'm usually a bit more composed. I'm finding this emotionally challenging on a way that I'm trying to analyze whilst talking about it.
It's
think
actually really
rating-
interesting because I can't figure out what your objection is.
Neither
think
can I.
Rating somebody else's college fund is abusive and an abuse of that trust and that relationship. Whereas, if there were actual romantic feelings that developed between us, which again there wasn't, she's not into younger dudes and she's not into men at all. But if something had developed along those lines, I don't think it would necessarily be bad.
Yeah.
And that wouldn't be an abuse of that relationship if it was just kind of a natural outgrowth.
Okay, so flip the sexes. Same scenario.
I can't do that publicly because
Okay,
then
all right.
everybody thinks I'm a creepy pedophile.
And I totally understand.
But in theory, you should be able to do that.
Yes, in theory that should be just as acceptable.
Yeah.
And I'm a female saying that.
Yeah.
So there, you're not canceled.
I have learned that it doesn't take one person in the group that you're supposed to be marginalizing supporting you to have you
There's
uncanceled.
2. I'm trans. I agree with you, Nash.
Okay. Yay! Thank you.
But I
Can't
think that,
cancel us now.
right.
That's the law.
So like
It's like no take backsies.
Yeah,
as soon as you say it, you can't be
yeah.
canceled.
Well, you know what? I'm glad that you're like trying to figure out why you have that impulse to be like, no, that's not okay.
It's very socially ingrained.
yeah.
Like
That's
I still
what
have
I'm
that,
trying to
think
point
that
out.
I still kind of have that reaction. Like I
Yes.
can't imagine having a relationship with a teenager.
I'm so on Charlie's side after you articulated your point, but in the beginning of the podcast, I was sounding more like I was saying, oh man, age gaps are really problematic, or like power imbalances are really problematic, and that was just
And they can be.
they can. Well, yeah, that was what I was trying to say is they can be like, but then
But
I
there's
had,
something
like,
we
I came
always
into this
need to
feeling
navigate
like I'm not sure
throughout
where I
our
really
lives.
fall along like the argument about age of consent, just because I haven't really had a good conversation about it yet.
Yeah.
Like I hadn't articulated my own thoughts.
Yeah.
And this has completely helped me like crystallize my opinion here.
Cool. Yay.
I haven't crystallized one yet, but it's currently brewing.
Yay.
I mean, when Jace asked, like, I'm not sure you guys disagree, and I'm like, I've been thinking that for the last 20 minutes. I'm not even sure where our points
looks
of
to me like you're
contention
just kind
are.
of poking at Charlie's point to try to like steal, or not steelman it, like the devil's advocate it to like.
That's the
Or
that's the phrase I was thinking of on the drive over. As like, I think I'm prepared to devil's advocate the other side here. I guess what it is that I'm.
it's very like uninteresting airtime if you just have 4 hosts who all very like strongly agree with each other.
Yeah,
We sometimes
Absolutely.
I don't know,
that
man. Tell that
dynamic.
to Fox News.
Oh well.
but
Should we fillet the president harder? Although I guess this was pre-February.
right. I still have confusions. Then it's more about legality stuff. I still don't know how that could possibly work. If you just lower the age, then great. That's maybe step one, but it does seem to be like you guys keep saying aptitude based.
Yes. Have
And-
some sort of aptitude test.
And I I feel like it's weird. I mean, maybe it's just my feeling weird. I don't know if I've articulated this yet. I have a lot of like obviously like yuck reactions about a lot of this stuff, and that's clearly, and if again, that's not usually one of my like salient reasons for disagreeing with something, and yet apparently it's a strong one here.
I have a lot of yuck
Like-
reactions to incest, but like morally, I think that there are cases where it's fine.
That's the standard example
I
to
have
help you
to,
get over
like-
yuck reactions.
Yeah, it's like ingrained culturally, and
and some people have problems with like
you still get a knee jerk like, oh, that's problematic. Like even I was doing that in the beginning of the podcast, and then I like, but when you actually like articulate it out, and
yuck reactions aren't a good reason for anything. I mean, a lot of people don't like people with two dicks having sex, or excuse me, two people with dicks having sex. And
Someone with two dicks having sex might be awesome.
but some some people they think, ooh, two guys kissing is yucky. That's like, all right,
So ban it.
great,
Yeah.
enjoy your yuckiness. That's not a good reason to do anything.
I think that's
And so
the disgust reaction is a lot of why so many laws did exist that like about interracial marriage, for example, like nobody could really articulate a good point against it except ew, it makes me feel bad.
right.
Ban it. It's got cooties. Like that's sort of the whole like trusting other people's autonomy and their ability to make decisions for themselves, even if you wouldn't do it and you disagree with it. Like it's laws with empathy.
I think I've said before too that I think I developed more fully. I hope to be more developed in 10 years than I am now, but in like my late teens, like I was aware of stuff as a teenager. I even remember having some original thoughts, but like but they were few and far between, right?
Okay.
I don't think that at 15 I was anywhere near where Charlie was, and so I'm typical minding for my 15-year-old self, and so I'm having difficult. It's kind of just like
Trauma
taking
forces
someone's.
kids to grow up fast.
So-
you see that on aptitude tests too.
And Steven, so that's great. I'm glad you went there, because then you would probably not have given consent or pursued or allowed a sexual relationship. And if something sexual happened with you, it probably would have been something that you would have protested. And so for like that, like basically disenfranchising every 15-year-old because some 15-year-olds aren't interested in sex yet makes no sense.
I think, and this is just this isn't me devil's advocating at this. This is just my actual vague recollection of my childhood. I do think that at 15, if somebody said, hey, you want to fuck, I probably would have said yes. But looking back, I don't think I was able to make that judgment. And, maybe because I've got some magic thing about sex in my head that really shouldn't be there. But, it could have been about anything. Do
you think that could have been something they could have uncovered on an aptitude test?
Okay.
I would need to be a magic one.
I want to dig right there.
Sure.
You wouldn't have been able to make that decision. Why is that decision so monumentally important?
Right,
What was going to happen if you fucked? Were you going to die afterwards? Were you going to have to marry that person to be with them for the rest of your life? See? You're going to demythologize sex. It's not this titanic event. It's not a tidal wave. It's freaking a ripple.
Especially nowadays that we have, protection.
Yes!
Yeah. Like back in the day, I can see why it was. And this is really surprising because back in the day, people had sex much younger and it wasn't a big deal. But back then, it actually could have been a much bigger deal where you get someone pregnant or you get pregnant.
You could die,
die.
too.
And you could,
Syphilis.
yeah, exactly.
And
There's-
society-
societally,
bad.
you are like now property.
Yeah. But
and have,
nowadays,
like-
it's much less
yeah.
of a big deal
Yes.
because we fixed
And the
most of
laws
these.
should reflect that. And our educational system should reflect that as well to prepare these young adults for the choices they need to make for themselves.
Also, given what you said about wanting to have, probably would have said yes if someone asked you to have sex at 15. Like, I don't know, maybe you might have, your hormones would have just taken over, but
Maybe.
just from personal experience, sometimes when your body is uncomfortable and not working, it just doesn't work out.
I'm not thinking that my body would have been. I'm thinking that my mind wasn't there yet.
Yeah.
And
Well, I mean, and then
and-
you probably would have, like, lots of times kids, when they first get into sex, start with things like, heavy petting, touching, kissing, that kind of thing. They don't go to full sex on the first go.
And not
Sure.
only that, but so your mind isn't there yet, but your body wants to experience. So that's how you get there. You experiment. You explore sexually. It should not be a crime to hit puberty and start exploring sex.
I think I don't think so either. But I think what, to me,
What
and
if,
now again we're back on laws, but I think that it should be a crime to test some kids' limits and see if they want to explore their horizons with you when you're 30, right? And they're 15. And I realize that was your situation and it worked out great, but if someone was like, hey, you know what, try this out, worst case scenario, you have a bit of regret, and like, oh, sure thing, person who knows a lot more than I do because you're twice my age. I don't think that we should be. I at least understand why people might be reluctant to say no. Let people go forward and try their hand at as many kids as they can. Right? Does that make sense? Because
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. I just,
as the 15-year-old, you might say, "Hey, I've got autonomy,"
yeah.
but you don't because
So
you're
is
stupid.
this
But
saying
that's
that
okay
you
because
still
you're
have to
making
protect
them.
against pedophiles?
I don't even know if it's because
Like, I think you still have to protect against sexual predators.
Yeah,
that's
like,
not
how do you-
every
Can I
30-year-old.
pump your intuition for a sec?
Yeah.
What if you at 15 had been approached by like a 30-year-old person who said, "Do you want to have sex, and also do you want do you want to have sex? Also, let's do it like without protection." What you would have said yes.
I don't remember my 15-year-old
if the
self well
person-
enough to answer that, but
Because
pretend
the
I'm
only way that you
giving
had said
whichever
that is
answer.
that you think that if someone had like initiated sex at 15, you would have said yes. But would you have said yes if it was another guy? You're straight, right?
I'm less straight now than I was 15 years ago, but
But you probably would have said no at the time because you
Yeah.
weren't attracted to like if it was somebody that like you hated, like if
Sure.
it was maybe like a cute girl but she was a total asshole who kicked puppies,
right.
you'd probably say no because I don't like you. Like you'd say no to an unsafe situation. Somebody who like if the 30-year-old was in some way off. If you didn't actually want to consent to that, you probably would have said no, right?
I guess I don't know what actually consent means when I was
Consent
15.
just means saying yes. I like if they ask some 30-something propositions you and
I mean, I know what it means.
Yeah.
It means assenting and
it means being
giving
sentient
confirmation.
enough to be able to like
See, and
gut check
like-
yourself whether or not like do I feel comfortable having sex with this person? Like, do they seem safe? Are we using
Am
protection?
I attracted?
Am I attracted to them?
Yeah, I mean, and again, I don't quite know where I'm at here, and I don't know if I can accurately model my 15-year-old self well enough to answer any questions honestly. I mean, I do remember seeing people in junior high, being picked up by their boyfriends who were at least 10 years older than us, and that was weird. And some of them had very bad times. Now, to Charlie's point, tough shit. Maybe you need an abortion. Maybe you had a regret.
A lot of people have really tough times
like,
having sex at 30 too,
yeah.
with other
And-
30-year-olds.
But I guess I don't know. Maybe
But
I
they
maybe
have
I
the
got
right
this
to
thing
make
about
that
just
choice.
keeping kids safe from stuff. Like if somebody offered a 15-year-old some cocaine, like, hey, you'll be, most people who try it once don't have a huge problem with it, but some people do, and you imagine getting a cocaine problem at 15, right?
I
Like,
was offered drugs at a young age, but that's another issue. And the people that offered me drugs were all ages.
yeah, I guess I'm just saying that just because someone's old enough to give the syllables yes,
I don't think
doesn't-
that's what that refers to. It refers to being able to like
understand all the stuff that's involved.
have your own theory of mind, like to have a fully formed theory of mind, I guess,
Yeah.
partially, and to like also know that you want sex and that like you're physically capable of having sex.
And if this is someone you feel comfortable doing
Like
it
if you
with.
have sexual attraction to someone and you can actually perform sex, then like you're physiologically old enough to do it, and then you're mentally old enough to do it if you can think through the like implications and make a responsible decision.
Or even an irresponsible decision.
Yeah, or that like
I mean, I have made irresponsible decisions as an adult, and I'm very sexually experienced.
yeah, like how much do you think the law should protect people from themselves is kind of the question.
And-
Oh, yeah.
And again, I just need to say this every time we're back on laws, but I
Well,
Wait,
it all comes down to protecting people from themselves, right? That's what all these laws are
because we're
supposed
talking
to
about
do.
laws here.
Are you
well, I'm also talking about like what I
imposing
feel
on
good
other
about.
people's decisions because they're making the wrong decisions and they have to be protected from?
And to be clear, we're talking about laws, and we're also talking about like just what we feel cool about, what we feel should be allowed, which are different things. Like, I mean,
Oh, and it doesn't mean I feel cool about it. Do I still get grossed out when I see like really young girls being like hit on by guys that like I don't know could be old enough to be their dads? Absolutely, there's a yuck factor there.
I mean, so we're all probably in favor of adults being allowed to post pictures or videos of themselves having sex on websites that condone that behavior, right? Like Pornhub, whatever.
Oh, can you upload your amateur videos, you mean, to the
Right.
internet? Yeah.
I mean,
You upload your own, you have to get consent from the other people in it, but yeah.
Well, yeah.
but if two 15-year-olds, just to rule out the confusion of a 30-year-old, or we can even have that one example too.
That's a
If the
really
15-year-old
complicated
says,
question.
if the 15-year-old says, totally put it online, I think it's great, we had an awesome time. I don't
they
think
should be
I
allowed
don't
to.
think they know what they're doing.
I don't know, but like you can also be in your 30s. There could be two 30-year-olds who also are impulsive and make a bad decision and regret it.
But at some point,
But
you
what if
stop.
who's been harmed by you putting porn online?
You
People have seen you having sex with someone, but like You regret that
that goes
decision
back
later.
to our
you take the
purity
video
culture.
down.
Yeah.
Well,
It all
the
keeps
vid-
going
there's-
back to that.
you can never
In
take
some
anything.
societies, it's great. In other societies, they're going to be like, let's brand an A on your forehead and cast you out into the wild.
You can never take anything off the internet, right? I mean, you can take it off of your personal server that
But
you're
I mean,
hosting.
How does that hurt you? Unless like. But
A lot of people-
maybe some shitty people find it and they're like, "Oh, look, that's Steven. Let's like spread it around." But like,
Yeah,
mostly like that's never even going to come back to you.
I think that some people don't.
People don't recognize porn like actors on the street generally.
No, I think that just some adults take down porn videos that they put up themselves, right?
Yeah, and they should be able to do that.
But like they're never down. They just wish they were.
Well, the thing
Like-
of not having like autonomy over your ability to be on the internet or not is a different
Yeah. All right.
rights question.
I
But
guess I'm just thinking like if we're cool with 15-year-olds and 30-year-olds having sex, we should totally be cool with them sharing that video online.
I think I am.
But I guess I wonder,
You could monetize that.
does a 15-year-old understand what they're getting into? That if you Google if it
Maybe
if
they
it
do.
trends,
Does
and like
anyone who's never done that before understand what they're getting into?
they might understand that things get popular online.
They have
you know,
a
that
little more perspective because of age,
and other life experiences like seeing
Yeah.
things trend on Twitter
but
or
they
something, right?
still can't predict the future accurately. None of us have that magic ability to never regret any decision we ever make or fully understand the repercussions of every decision we make. And like trying to magically extend that umbrella over an adolescent who's going to make more mistakes because they're exploring something new in all these different contexts is just, I don't know, it doesn't work.
So
Also,
I mean, I
the
don't want
excuse-
to draw the line at like we should have to be able to perfectly predict the future like wizards to have that be the bar. That no one's claiming that anyone should ever be able to do that. What we can do is we can imagine probable futures and anticipate outcomes and decide on which ones we want to happen, right? And gear the future towards those probable outcomes.
Also, the excuse "I was in my teens" is commonly accepted by a lot of people. Like, the younger you
That's
are,
literally
the
the
more
age
likely.
where you're supposed to mess up.
Yeah,
Like,
the more people are like, once you're older,
Your
people are
brain
like, you're
changes.
40 years old and you're still making this stupid decision. Nah, man. But like, someone's
I
like,
actually
I
bring
was
something
14.
up?
I was like, oh yeah, okay, you know.
one of the things that I think is important to take into account, we sort of talked about it with like elderly people and dementia, but that there are different stages of life, different developmental stages that like do have earmarks. Teenager brains are more impulsive, more creative, less, what is the word? They're just more risk tolerant. That's intentional because, again, Wes, fight me. This is evolutionary psychology, but hunter-gatherer times, you are supposed to, that's the age where you're supposed to like break your like bonds from your parents and your family and go out and learn how to be a human.
You're supposed to really test if that lake is full of alligators.
No, more like you're supposed to go find a mate from another tribe so you don't inbreed.
Sure, but as far as being risk averse or being
And if you
not
stayed
risk
like
averse.
attached to your parents, like in the sense of attachment, which is a whole psychological thing. You know what I mean by that, Charlie, right? Like attachment theory.
Yeah.
You unbond from your parents as your primary attachment figure, and you go and rebond with other humans. You find peers, mentors, partners, and start your own family. And like,
And that all generally happens in the teens.
yeah, like the thing is that that's instrumental. Like you become more risk tolerant during that time period because like it's advantageous for you
It's
to,
also
to go make mistakes. Like the way you learn shit is by going and making mistakes.
I'd also like to point out that is one of the time periods when your body is most able to absorb the consequences of failed risks. Like, you can bounce back from shit in your teens that
You're
you
more risk
cannot
tolerant.
bounce back from when you're older.
And you're more bouncy.
Yeah.
There's this joke about like children bounce. I like my mom owned a preschool and I worked with children and like that and like at the library, and it's just like this weird kind of fact about children is that they're really resilient to
to physical damage.
to physical damage.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like in some ways they're more fragile than an adult, but in a lot of ways, like they can just. I remember like when I was in my teens and I was like chasing kids around at the summer camp, and I was just like, oh my god, they have so much energy. Or like it's always the joke of adults saying like, yeah, I wish I had that energy. But like these kids would run in like 95-degree heat, direct sun, like for hours.
Yeah.
I was
Something about
in my teens
metabolism?
and I was tired.
Do our fucking mitochondria start decaying as we get older or some
Yes.
shit? Fucking
Well, we
Well,
also have more neuroplasticity when we're young. Like
Yeah.
our brains are literally forming
Yeah.
very rapidly, and I want to just circle back to what I said earlier, was that the actual rape and abuse standing alone, as a child, I would have recovered from much better if the
stigma hadn't been thrown on top too.
Yes, and the bystander effect. All the victim blaming and purity culture stuff. Like, I was given the impression that I was merely along for the ride, and whatever happened to me, including like rape and abuse, and what kind of touch happened, was not my decision.
You had no
However,
control 'cause
the
you're not a
negative
person.
consequences of the decisions made on my behalf were entirely mine. All you, kiddo. And that was what was really traumatizing. Like, honestly, I think it's very brave that Jace was just like, yeah, like, being raped wasn't the worst thing I've ever been through. I
Not by
absolutely
far.
agree. That moment was bad. How I was treated because of it, and how, like, I was, like, basically targeted for my abuse. My abusers were protected. I was the one punished.
I think part of the reason that I have recovered so well is that I never told anybody about any of my
I
incidences.
didn't tell anyone. My
but they, like-
abusers started to spread rumors about me, and I was targeted by other abusers
I was lucky
who
enough to
also
not
let
have
other
that
abusers
happen, too.
know. And, like,
My abusers never met each other, and they were like years
Yeah.
apart. Like,
I lived in a terrible place,
it sounds like it. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
and I was raised by a terrible family. But, like,
You've come out of it really well. I'm like,
oh,
I mean, like the whole thing. Yeah, I like actually do. You know, there's post-traumatic growth is something that I've been reading about recently. It's like
Yeah.
kind of, I don't know if it's a new psychological idea, but I think it actually goes back to World War II. At least like one of the papers that I've seen. But that was when they were just carpet bombing England. It actually mobilized the people that lived in England more to fight the war, where they had been ambivalent. It was there's this effect called a near miss.
I
that,
will.
like,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
like surviving a bombing by near miss, like it means like maybe your house was hit, but like you got out and you survived, and you come back a lot stronger from that. Like if certain psychological conditions are at play, like you still feel like you have control. Like you feel like you can tell sort of a survival story like to yourself. Like I couldn't, there's a possibility that I could get out of this and become stronger because of it. But like if you're a child stuck in a situation where like you have no control, you literally can't tell yourself that story like I can survive this, because you're like, I'm at the whim of what other people are telling me and doing to me. I may or may not survive this based on like what other people decide.
Pretty much. I don't really want to go there, because that's like, yeah.
I'm not
I
trying
will
to also
say
like,
that-
say that PTSD doesn't exist. I'm just
Well,
saying
no,
that,
and
like,
I've probably had this discussion with you guys before, but I really, really loathe that common, apathetic, terrible saying like, "Oh, you wouldn't be the wonderful person you are today if you didn't suffer."
Yeah.
Blah blah blah, and I'm like, "Fuck you."
I'm not saying that
Don't
wouldn't be
you
who
dare
are today,
retroactively justify abuse. Abuse is abuse, and that was a loss, and it took from me. And I am a wonderful person despite having endured that, not because I endured it. Thank you very much. I wasn't born a piece of shit,
Yeah, I mean,
you know, like, and like refined through suffering. I was born a loving, fearless kid. I loved people. I would go hug strangers and crawl up their legs at parties, and I liked to dance, and I was just so social. And I almost lost that child to abuse.
yeah, I'm amazed that you came out of it like as healthy and stable as you are. Like,
If I could,
because like definitely, people can be traumatized and it can wreck their lives. Like,
yeah.
I don't want, like, by saying that post-traumatic growth exists, I don't like mean to say that like
No,
PTSD
I think it's a
doesn't
fact.
exist. I
Yeah.
think that it's unfortunate that people do have sort of different levels of cope.
Yes.
That's like, but that's another thing where
A lot
like kids
has
have different levels of aptitude, and it's not their fault for being.
Yeah. But a lot of it has to do, like, I guess the reason I really wanted to talk about this with you guys is, if I could go back, or even if I could change the laws in society for the future, so the next child who endures abuse like I did isn't further victimized by the reactions of people around them. I think that like dealing with the physiological realities of sex, demythologizing it, addressing purity culture issues and sexual double standards and all this shit is vital to allowing people to basically bounce back from trauma faster and also not be re-traumatized continually because they have experienced trauma. And part of like changing laws around sexual consent, why I feel so strongly about it is because that I can look back and be like, God, that would have been helpful. I lost so much to the, not just the events, but the re-traumatization and the social consequences. Decades of my life spent extremely mentally ill and constantly re-traumatized, and then like 1 step forward and 5 steps back. And I'm not going to ever get those years back. I'm in my mid-40s. Like, what I have lost is irreparable. Like there is no giving that back. And so I look at the way things are now, and I see these laws, and I see people's reactions, and I'm like, no, that's not helpful. You're not helping young people by reacting that way, by framing it that way. Like, if you really care about them, you need to acknowledge that they are adolescents, they're sexually exploring, they are less risk adverse, they are at a experiential disadvantage, but that doesn't mean they don't have agency. There's no reason to re-traumatize them or to traumatize them when they weren't traumatized in the first freaking place.
Right.
So that's really what was important to me to get across.
I really liked the distillation. That sounds like I was going to say on a t-shirt, but it should be somewhere like on a trophy of, I'm not the person I am because of what I endured. I'm the person I am despite what I endured.
Yes,
I like that a lot.
that's a quotable Charlie and Bradley.
I love it. It sounds like in the instances of the abusive encounters you had as a kid, that it's not like more lenient laws with sex with children would have helped you there. It sounds like the law failed you. That what we needed was more intense legal action.
No, that wasn't
Everything they did was illegal.
Yeah.
Nothing they did was illegal?
No, everything they did was illegal.
Oh, right.
Yeah, that isn't a matter of a
That wasn't bad laws. That was just laws not being like enacted at all.
Badly enforced.
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Enforced.
And
Yeah.
that was because of a lot of purity culture stuff.
Gotcha.
Victim blaming.
I didn't bring up my rapes. I never told anyone because like I knew that I would be the one that would be the most hurt by telling people, by society.
There you go.
Like definitely like they weren't gonna, I don't know, like charge those people. They would like, yeah, I don't know. Or even if they did, it would be like, you know, time spent in a trial, lots of money that you have to spend. You could lose the trial, and then you could like owe the other person money. Also, your name is now slandered because it's
forever.
involved with dirty sex, and you gotta wear the big A and whatever. Like,
So we
sex shouldn't be that like taboo, stigmatized.
We need laws that are simultaneously more understanding that kids can make decisions about sex.
And that sex
with
isn't
agency,
necessarily something that
and-
you have to prevent people from having because it's inherently bad.
Sure, totally. But we need laws that can both encompass that and that like make it easier and more obviously a safe path for victims to come forward when they're being victimized and not when they're choosing to do it.
I mean, raping a child was already illegal in Hawaii at that time. It
Yeah.
wasn't the law that was the problem, it was the society.
No, I know. But that's what I'm saying. So, yeah, you're right. It is not the law of the society. Fair enough.
Yeah, it was a horrible place.
I
That
have
particular.
I have one last and we can toss it out or we can entertain it if it's quick. If I went to work tomorrow, assuming I went to work because work was a place I went to instead of my my office at my house, and I punched a coworker in the face, I would be tried with a crime, assault. Could be rather serious. If I'm 15 and I'm at school and I punch another child in the face, I probably don't go to jail and I'm not tried in front of a judge and stuff because people realize, oh, kids do stupid shit. This seems to indicate different understandings of aptitudes among children and adults. So like, and then, I mean, if two 15-year-olds are brawling it out, hitting each other in the face, that's different. If a 15-year-old and a 30-year-old are brawling it out and the 30-year-old keeps hitting the 15-year-old back, that's weighed differently as a crime. Is this readjustment of agency for children adjusting across the board or just for sex?
Oh, across the board.
Across the board. And it's all in what you just said. Like, that's exactly what I've been saying. Like, we mythologize. God, that's a hard word for me to say for some sex. Where it's like, if a teenager has sex, it's got to be a crime. It's a really big deal. It's like, no, not necessarily. It should actually be taken less seriously, probably.
Yeah, you have to take other stuff into account. What if, like, the reason that you went and punched your coworker in the face is that he had, like, stolen your car?
I don't think that the cop who arrests me would care.
I think
I
No,
think
they
they
wouldn't.
actually will mitigating circumstances in the
I think you might get like some kind of punishment for punching the person, which is not like the socially correct way to respond, but like people would be understanding that like he would go to jail. You get your car back, you know.
You know, it's like if and I realize I'm stretching and this past where it was supposed
Or
to
if you
go.
like killed your wife, like
Sure, yeah.
At that point, I don't think you'd be held accountable for anything.
Yeah, but like, you know, if me and my other adult friends want to have a fight club, you know, I guess it's already illegal. So I mean,
wait, is it?
I
thought you could consent to fight clubs.
well, maybe if you're an adult, but if a 15-year-old wanted to join and we beat the shit out of him,
Ah, I see.
and he's like, I wanted to, I was into it. It's like, yeah, but now you don't
that's his
realize
choice.
you didn't understand that
I didn't know that
you
pain
won't
was
be.
gonna hurt.
Well, you didn't maybe, you know, kids don't maybe realize like, oh yeah, those teeth don't grow back. Your first set did, you know, or like, yeah, that contusion, that broken eye socket will never heal the same. You know, you're going to be disfigured for the rest of your life. As an adult, you've had contexts of not necessarily that it doesn't have to be the exact thing, but that's part of like wisdom is seeing different things and applying it to
But you had
to
to
your
make the
situation.
mistakes first in order to have that experience.
Yeah, I had
You had to have those learning experiences to get that wisdom.
I had brothers-in-law who were literally in street gangs and did suffer those sorts of, you know, facial trauma in fights. I think they would have been a lot better off in a fight club than in a street gang.
Yeah, I mean, I guess
they should have consented to that instead.
you know, I guess
Legalized fight clubs.
if I'm looking around for, you know, whatever to fight, right? I would just think it better for me and maybe for society. That's where I'm curious about to say find someone your own size and age, rather than go to your local junior high and ask if someone
What
wants
if
to
you
get into a
wanted
fight with you.
BDSM with someone because like that's more related. Like if you're a masochist, you're 15, and then like you find a 31-year-old at like a sex club that wants to beat you up, and you agree to it. Like, does that change your perspective at all? Because like the cases that you're saying are still assault. I think assault is still like bad.
Well, but if it's
Where, like,
consensual assault,
you can still accuse someone of rape. If it's consensual assault, then like I think it's the same thing. Like it's just bodily autonomy. You get like there's a point where you get to the age in scare quotes, maturity wise, etc., to be able to make decisions about what is done to your body. And I think it's absolutely your body, your choice. Because yeah, whether it's abortion or getting punched in the face or having sex, like don't you think that
I think
there's a point where you should be able to have the right to decide what happens to your body, like even including euthanasia, I think.
We can't have
Absolutely.
it both ways. If the adult in the room is more liable than the young adult in the room, then the young adult has less agency than the adult. Like, we can't have it both.
I mean, I think I've got, and you know, this sounds like we're near the end. I'll try and hit both things. You know, like on the one hand, sorry, Jace, what was the last thing you said? I'm trying to get it back.
Bodily
in my head.
autonomy, like
Oh
that's what
yeah,
I was saying
yeah.
across
So
the board.
I think that at some level, and this does come with, and it just happens to be tied with age, but it is experience. You know, you can have enough XP before you're 12 to understand things that someone at 20 might not, but it correlates strongly with age because it correlates with time.
Yes.
Like, so you'll see like that some actions have consequences beyond your understanding. And the first time you see that, it might not even happen to you; it might happen to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
But that the odds of you having that first wisdom moment go up. The odds of that happening go up with age, right? So like, if you're gonna drink and drive, if you're 15, it might not sound like that bad of an idea. Worst case scenario, I run off the road and I wake up, drive home because you're stupid and you're 15, right? But if you're 35 and you think that way, you're an idiot. But you're still making decisions for other people. But then the sex thing doesn't work with drunk driving. But I don't know. I guess I guess
we're getting
we are getting far afield.
Yeah,
tonight.
we're getting afield from
This is like the general question of how much should laws protect people from themselves, which I think is still related, but it's
that is maybe
not
where
exactly
we're
on topic.
I think that is where we're differing though. And that's what I was bringing up the physical violence example of consenting violence, because that seems to distill the
Well,
thing
also
here.
violence is worse than sex,
Yes,
potentially.
yes.
That's another thing. Like, you can be raped and it can be like a non-violent, coercive thing, and you come out of it maybe like mentally scarred, but like I think there's
But physically undamaged. It's not like you're in the hospital and you're therefore have sexual dysfunction for the rest of your life because you had to have surgeries.
even if you get pregnant, you should be able to get an abortion.
You should, yeah.
like you recover from this. You can recover from this. Like, I don't know if that
There are
was
different magnitudes of violence and
sexual abuse or sex
like,
generally, I
and,
guess.
Yeah. So and then their consent is everything. It's everything. So I'm a virgin and I'm having sex with someone for the first time and I'm all about it until it starts to hurt, and then I say, whoa, 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 I don't like this. I'm not consenting to continue. Consent is everything. Bodily autonomy is everything. I draw my line in the sand there every time.
Yeah, and in that case, if the 15-year-old wants to join the fight club, if they say I'm consenting, then they get to do it, and they get to make the mistake of not understanding that they're risking lifetime brain damage. But that's just an owned
How about
risk.
football?
But that's just an owned risk of letting people do what they want.
You can play
And I
football
think
when you're 16.
I think, and again, I'm still trying to distill where my like
I think I understand where you're
recalcitrance is coming from.
I think it's coming from. It sounds like you're trying to compare an ideal world. Like ideally, like there should be a better way. Like it's sort of the same thing as like the banned goods store. How we all sort of agreed that should exist because people should be able to make their own decisions.
We all sort of agreed. That's what I was going to bring up.
Okay, if they're competent, I guess.
No. It was just that. Is part of me. I think the banned goods store makes perfect sense. I think that it's my inner libertarian is super into it. I have this other part of me.
I think the thing
that
is
says
that like
people
it's
are too
better
dumb.
than the system that we have now. It's not perfect. It still has lots of externalities. It's going to be terrible. Some people are going to take the like stupid drug and die.
Right.
But
and part of me has this.
that world still looks better utilitarian wise than the one that we have.
That's probably true. I think when I'm just trying to like analyze my own feelings about it is like part of me has this intuition that people just can't, like, in many cases can't make judgments for themselves. It's like, look, I know you say you want that, but tough. I being the state or the God artificial intelligence that we built, I'm giving you this vaccine. I'm going to make you wear a mask. I'm going to not let you drive 150 miles an hour on the highway. Like, whatever it is, right? I've realized that's completely at odds with the banned goods store. It's somehow I need to square this out. And I'll do this off the air. Like, I think having a banned goods store sounds like a perfectly entertainable idea, and yet there seems to be. I'm learning that there's this part of me that feels the exact opposite way about it.
I think it depends on just like as the superhuman AI, you don't want to tell humans, okay, you can't have relationships with people of the opposite sex because those are too often turn out badly because fuck, that's what most humans want really badly, you know? On the other hand, you also don't want to be so permissive where you're like, yeah, go ahead and blow up the earth. I know that's not ideal, but it's your own choice.
Thank you. That actually is a great distillation of it.
So yeah, it's...
You can't protect them from everything, and you can't let them do everything.
But like the scale is not blow up the world. The scale is have sex you regret.
Exactly. And that's the social position right now seems to be very much like all sex is bad and harmful, and we can't stop adults from doing it because adults are fucking self-destructive, terrible people, but at least we can make these laws that say no one under 18 can do this horrible thing. And we are very much pushing against this idea that it's a horrible thing that should be legislated away for as long as is possible and should be embraced as something that people find out and experiment with as they age.
And we're also not saying there shouldn't be an age of consent. We're saying that the age of consent should be lower than it is in Colorado and much clearer.
It definitely...
And also not have special exemptions for like, oh, but if you're married
but
to
if
the
you're
12-year-old.
Yeah, oh my God, yes. Oh, but that's a whole other ball game. This was fun.
Yeah, that one definitely seems weird. I've got nothing to defend that one with.
Ooh, if you actually read through the law, I wonder if your skin would crawl like mine did. Oh, that was a loathsome experience.
Well, it's not a loathsome experience.
Thanking our patrons.
Yay!
Oh, man,
Trust Steven for that segue.
Who's the lucky patron who gets to be thanked after that?
And I do want to use this as a quick bridge to our next episode where we'll talk about, in general, adult kids' autonomy as opposed to just the specific age of sexual consent that we were talking about today. Assuming that something crazy doesn't happen and I can't read a single more page in the next 2 weeks. But hopefully I'll be done with the book by then.
Right on. Well, this week's patron is Bob Rocks. And Bob does rock. Thank you so much.
Fuck yeah, Bob.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks and sorry, Bob.
You did this, Bob. You made this episode possible. And we thank you for it.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing this to all the people out there and for helping us to continue to do the show that we do. We couldn't do it without you.
Totally.
All right. If you would like to be a patron of ours, there's information at thebayesianconspiracy.com, which is our home site. You can rate and review us at iTunes and other places. Let your friends know. Am I forgetting anything? We have a Discord.
If you haven't read Worth the Candle, whether or not you listen to mine and Enosh's podcast about it, it's amazing.
Yeah.
I know at least one person who's listening to that podcast just for fun and not reading the story.
Oh.
And I've been hounding him to read the fucking book. It's actually a lot of fun. And I think we are almost comprehensive enough with our discussion of it that you can probably squeak by, but you're missing stuff. Read it.
Thanks, everybody. And is that it? Oh, it?
That's it.
Okay. We'll see you all in 2 weeks. Bye.
Bye,
Awesome.
everyone.
Now there's some coffee.